Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku was Sonya Yumeno Part 1. If you guys enjoy this What If and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. It was a warm, late April day in 𝗵𝗃, Japan, and the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. The petals danced gracefully in the wind, captivating anyone who stopped to watch them fall. Watching the blossoms was one Sonya Yumeno, a third year at 𝗵𝗃 Private Middle School. He tapped his fingers rapidly against the desk as the teacher collected the students' work, waiting for the school day to end so that he could tell his brother about the UA mock test and prepare himself for the entrance exams. His pointed ears twitched as the teacher cleared her throat, pulling his attention away from the window. You're all third years now, and it's time that you all start thinking seriously about your future. She paused to bring attention to a bundle of papers in her hand. I want you all to fill out these handouts about your future plans before the end of the day and leave them on your desks, though I'm sure that most of you are planning on going to the hero course. The class erupted into cheers, showing off their quirks despite the strict rules of the school. The class was silenced by the teacher's stern glare as she went around the class to hand out the paper. When she was done, she went back to her desk and clasped her hands together cheerfully. I would also like to congratulate two of our classmates for passing the UA mock exams. Mina Ashido and Yumeno Sonya passed with flying colors, she said proudly. The two named were instantly bombarded with admiration and wonder from their other classmates. I knew that you could do it, Ashido. I heard that Kirishima and Kayano passed too. Man, I'm jealous. I always knew you were going to ace it, Sonya, even if people said you would get rejected because of your dance. Oh, hey. The classmate was silenced by a harsh smack to the back of his head by the student next to him. Dude, he hissed, you seriously need to learn how to shut up. Choosing to ignore the comment, Sonya rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, his face unchanging. Thanks, I studied really hard for this, he said, trying to turn the conversation away from his father's. A voice in his head echoed. You should hurt that guy. Shut up, I bet. I took the mock test too, but I completely blew it. I think I'm gonna try to get into 𝗬𝗪𝗼 Academy instead. Another student scoffed and joined the conversation. 𝗬𝗪𝗼? You'd have a better chance getting into 𝐒𝐻𝑗in than the school that's rivals with UA. Sonya stopped listening to the two students after the conversation turned into an argument, and instead decided to focus on his paper. The bell rang soon after and the class was dismissed. Sonya excitedly hopped his way to the school gates, wanting to get home as soon as possible to tell his brother the good news. As he walked closer to the gates, he could see a crowd starting to form, blocking his way out. As he slowly maneuvered his way through the sea of people, he could hear the whispers of his schoolmate. This wasn't new. Being the child of two villains was enough to make anyone stare, but being the child of two villains and trying to get into the most renowned hero school in all of Japan would get people talking. Sonya ignored the whispers and waded through the sea of people, mumbling an apology whenever he bumped into someone. When he made it out the other side, he saw a familiar mess of black and white hair and smiled gratefully. His brother was standing by the side of the school entrance, hands folded in front of his chest and waiting. The person in question waved when he caught sight of his younger brother, greeting him with a fist bump. What are you doing here, serious? He asked quietly, tucking his long black hair behind his ears. His brother grinned. Is it so bad that I want to walk my brother home from school? He asked, but Sonya wasn't buying it. Aren't you still working? He asked flatly, crossing his arms in suspicion. His brother waved his hand dismissively and started pulling Sonya away from the school. It's fine. I'm on break right now. Sonya looked at his brother suspiciously, but decided to let it be. After all, it was rare for him and his bro to get any quality time. He was always at school or preparing for high school, and Sirius was always out working at his busy job. The two walked slowly towards their apartment, absently talking about whatever came to mind. Sonya laughed at a story that his brother was telling of a very dumb customer he had to deal with, absently running his hands through his hair and scratching his scaled hands as he did so. His brother noticed and commented accordingly. You need to stop scratching your scales. It's a bad habit, he said sternly, pinching his ear as she did so. Sonya swatted his brother's hand away. I am fine, Sirius. It's not hurting me or anything. It's not fine, Sony. You'll scratch your scales right off one day, just you wait and see. Then you'll wish that you listened to me. Sonya rolled his eyes at his brother's worries. They've had this same conversation dozens of times since he first started to live with him. Just as he was about to argue back, he remembered why he was so excited to see his brother in the first place. His eyes lit up as an excited smile grew on his face. Oh, by the way, about the UA high school mock test. I got. Sonya was cut off by the sound of his brother's phone. He put up her index finger to silence him as he listened. Hey Yumeno-san, there's a customer here asking about an order, but I can't find it anywhere. They're getting angry. Could you come help me out? 𝗬𝗏 grimaced as he heard the news before turning his attention back to his brother. Sorry, Sonya. I got a work thing that I have to go to. We can talk about this later, all right? Sonya deflated, looking to the side to hide his dismay. This wasn't new. 𝗬𝗏 was often pulled away from home or rest for work reasons. Oh, yeah, all right. See you later, he spoke softly. 𝗬𝗏 took one last apologetic look at his brother before he jogged off towards his work. Turning back towards the direction of his house, Sonya was surprised to see smoke rising up into the sky and the distant forms of heroes racing towards the scene. If he remembered correctly, there was another middle school in that direction. Sonya decided to ignore the commotion. With all the heroes, it would be solved before he'd even get there anyway. You should go over there. It could be fun seeing villains in action again. There's no point. Don't say such useless things, Sonya retorted out loud. Sonya entered his home and took off his shoes, placing his bag on the shelf like he did every day. He entered his room and changed out of his school uniform and into some jogging clothes. He typically did his evening run after dinner, but he wanted to get it out of the way early so that he could possibly celebrate his accomplishment with his brother. Sonya put in his earbuds and started listening to his favorite playlist as he locked the door behind him. As he passed by the same neighborhood as he had dozens of times before, Sonya couldn't help but let a small smile slip onto his face. He was so incredibly close to his goal that he could practically taste it. It had always been Sonya's dream to get into U. Ever since he was 11 years old. It was the school that his most respected heroes all graduated from, and now it felt like it was his turn to do the same. Sonya paused briefly to change songs when he noticed that he had received an email. Curious, he opened the email only to find that it was from 𝗂𝗏 itself. Sonya almost dropped his phone in shock. He hadn't expected any sort of news from the school for at least a couple of days. And with shaky hands, Sonya opened the unexpected email. To whom this may concern. Congratulations on being one of the 600 to pass the 𝗂𝗏 High School Entrance Exam mock test. We of the staff have set the date for the entrance exam to be on May 23rd at 𝗂𝗏 at 4 p.m. You will enter the front gates and wait in line to receive a slip of paper that will tell you what lecture hall you will be having your written exam in. After you are finished your written exam, your group will be led to the second part of the exam. Good luck in plus ultra. Sonya couldn't help but pump his fist excitedly as he finished reading the message. He quickly ran back home with excitement in his step, waving to his neighbors as he did so. He once again entered the empty house and all but danced to his room. Sonya flopped on his bed and reread the message over and over again as if to make sure that it wasn't all a dream. He turned his head to the side and caught the eye of a picture of his family, his dad's, all 9 of his siblings, and himself back at home during spring. His eyes softened as he gazed upon their smiling faces, an ache forming in his chest knowing that his dads couldn't share this special day with him. Sonya gently picked up the picture and held it close to his heart. I did it, guys, he spoke softly. I am taking the exam in a month. Though I must admit that I am a bit anxious, he chuckled to himself. I don't know what's going to happen in the second part though, so wish me luck. I miss you. It's not too late to be a villain, you know. Yes it is. Don't say that again, Mel. He placed the picture back down and looked towards his clock. It was 5:30 and his brother still wasn't home. Frowning, Sonya looked at his phone to see if he had left him any messages. There were none. He let out a dispirited breath and walked towards the kitchen. He would have to make his own food. Just as he finished making some 𝗔𝗏𝗏, one of the few meals Sonya knew how to make, he heard the front door open and his brother's tired voice call out. I'm home, he said wearily as he peered around the corner. Sorry I'm so late. I had to wait for the roads to clear after some villain decided to make a muck of it. It's as if villains don't care about our personal lives at all, he joked. Sonya couldn't help but smile at his brother's weird sense of humor. He sat down at the table with a small pile of paperwork and began to look it over as he ate. The two sat in silence with only the sound of a pen to interrupt them. 𝗬𝗏 suddenly stopped writing and placed his pen down on the table. He pinched the bridge of his nose as he looked towards his younger brother. Sorry about being so distracted, Sonya, but this new schedule for work is really messing up all of my time management for the other shit I'm trying to manage. He folded his arms on the table and gave a tired smile. What were you trying to tell me earlier? Sonya grinned. It was about the 𝗂𝗏 mock exams. I passed. And I got an email today about the real exams. Look, he passed his phone over to his brother with the email already on the screen. He looked at the device for a while before standing up from his seat and pulling Sonya into a spinning hug, disorienting the boy. Sonya, I am so proud of you, he gushed, grasping him by his shoulders. You are going to be the best hero. Have you drawn out your hero costume? You need to remember to be specific. Did you double-check your Quirk registration? Things can change and it's fine, 𝗬𝗏. Yes, I've started working on my hero costume. And no, I haven't double-checked my Quirk registration. I haven't even been accepted into 𝗂𝗏 yet, Sonya interrupted. 𝗬𝗏 loosened his grip, his smile falling slightly as he gazed at his brother. He'd been watching over him ever since Sonya came to live with him over 4 years ago after their parents got themselves arrested. The thought of Sonya going off on his own to do such dangerous work. Sirius shook his head, not wanting to think about that. Sonya, I know that Victor isn't exactly the best at keeping in touch, but are you absolutely sure that you don't want to be recommended? Alina also took the UA Hero exam and there were robots everywhere and a lot of the other kids got massively hurt. He insisted. Sonya took a step back and looked up to his brother with a rare look of determination. I have never been more sure about anything in my life. I have to prove to myself that I belong at UA and I can't do that if I take any shortcuts, he explained. Sirius looked at him in surprise, not expecting that to be his reasoning. He then smiled softly before patting his brother's head. You truly are your father's son, she remarked and walked out of the room, needing to get back to his work. Sonya felt as if a weight had been lifted off his chest. He was now officially going to take the UA entrance exam. Although he was excited, Sonya wished that he could have celebrated this accomplishment with his family more. Though it was 8:15 and he really did have intentions of taking a morning run. Content with the day, Sonya got into bed, sending one last goodnight to his family photo before turning off the lights. Many weeks passed by in a flash and before he knew it the exam was in a couple of days. It was a Thursday afternoon and Sonya had just finished his grocery shopping. His brother had messaged him that he wouldn't get home until late that night so he had the house to himself. Sonya stretched as he put down the heavy bags, his muscles still sore from the workout yesterday. Ever since that night some weeks ago, he'd been training relentlessly for the exam. If it was anything like his brother said it was, then he would need every bit of strength in his body and of his quirk in order to pass. As he passed by a hallway mirror, something caught Sonya's eye. When he inspected further, he found that the ends of his hair were turning that pastel hydrangea blue color that he hated. He frowned at his hair for growing. Now he needed to go to the store to get some hair dye again. Sighing, Sonya grabbed his wallet and slowly walked towards the nearest convenience store, which was quite far from his house. Oi oi oi, don't get rid of it again. That color is a part of you. I don't like it, and I'm not getting rid of it, I'm just covering it up. Mel grumbled and cursed before going silent, leaving Sonya to roll his eyes. The store's bell jingled as Sonya opened the door. He went straight to the section with the hair dye to find his favorite brand. The one that was being sponsored by the hero Midnight. After he had found it, Sonya was about to go pay when he bumped into someone, causing the box to slip from his grasp. Sorry man, I didn't see you there. Hey, I know you. You're that Yumeno guy, right? Sonya was surprised to realize that he recognized that voice. He looked up to see that guy in that other class who also passed the mock exam. Kirishima was his name. Yeah, you're Kirishima, right? 𝗓𝗓𝗓, Sonya asked, still surprised to see him in his neighborhood. He couldn't help but wonder if he lived nearby. The other boy beamed, happy that someone so well-known recognized him. Yeah, that's me. Sorry for making you drop your stuff. Let me get that for you. He went to grab a box, but paused when he realized what it actually was. You're here for hair dye too. I didn't know that you dyed your hair, Kirishima commented. Too, you color your hair as well? Sonya asked curiously, ignoring the further grumbling of Mel. Kirishima grew a bit sheepish at the question. No, but I want to dye it red. I don't know a thing about hair dye though, he explained with a chuckle. Sonya looked back towards the shelves of hair products, specifically at the shelf where he got his own dye. I don't know that much about colors other than black, but he paused to grab a box of the same brand that he got earlier. I would recommend this stuff. It lasts a pretty long time and it doesn't damage your hair. I'd also get some of their specialty shampoo. It helps keep your roots from growing out. Kirishima took the boxes with a gracious smile. Thanks bro. You're actually a pretty cool dude. They both paid for their things and walked out of the store. Sonya felt like a fish out of water. He wasn't used to talking to kids his age. He was always pushed into heroics by his teachers, so he never got a chance to socialize like a normal person. Good seeing you. I guess we'll see each other at the exam, Kirishima spoke confidently and turned to leave. Just at that moment, Sonya remembered something important that his brother had let slip that night all those weeks ago. Wait, he called out, making Kirishima stop and turn. Sonya's pointed black nails started to scratch the equally black scales on his hand, instantly regretting how loud he was. Averting his eyes from his classmate, Kirishima waited patiently for him to finish. I don't really know if this means anything, but my brother said that when other people took the exam in the past, they had to fight a bunch of robots. They sounded big, and apparently they attack you, he explained. Kirishima's eyes brightened at Sonya's words. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, he called back before turning back in the direction he was walking. Sonya felt a tinge of pride in himself as he walked home. He actually managed to hold a conversation with someone without making it awkward. And not only that, but he actually helped them. Not being able to control the very faint smile that dawned his face, Sonya all but skipped the rest of the way home, still thinking about his faithful encounter. Great, now you have competition. Way to go, dumbass. Don't be such a party killer. A hero helps people, that's literally my job now. Despite not having a physical body, Sonya could feel Mel roll his eyes. The last few days before the exam were both the slowest and longest days of Sonya's life. He wanted to take the exam, to prove himself as a hero, but the anxiety in his chest seemed to be adamant about the old saying, if you don't try you won't fail, and Sonya did not want to fail. Despite the young boy's confliction, time still passed by without a care for his worries, and before he knew it, he was standing in front of UA's gates with what must have been hundreds of other students. One by one, the teachers were calling out names in reverse and separating every kid into a different group. Since there were so many other kids still in waiting, Sonya had a feeling that it would be a while before his name was called, so he opted to possibly look for a familiar face, secretly hoping to talk to Kirishima again. He seemed like a nice person. After a while of wandering around with no luck, Sonya was shoved from behind into the person in front of him, almost causing them both to fall. Sonya immediately jumped back, stunned by the sudden contact. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump into you like that. It was an accident, it's fine. The person interrupted. Sonya paused his awkward apology. He knew that voice. The person turned around to reveal Kayano Saoko, a girl who was in Kirishima's class, and a girl who did not like him. She stared at him. Her cold sea green eyes seemed to stare straight through his soul, causing Sonya to freeze under her gaze. He was only saved from this uncomfortable situation when the person who bumped into him spoke up. "Aw crap, why did they let her in again? This is gonna be difficult, apologies. I didn't mean to bump into you there. Are you well?" Sonya was relieved to talk to someone else and get rid of the tension in the air. When he turned around to speak to this person, he was momentarily startled to see the head of a bird rather than a human. It wasn't uncommon for people to have some sort of quirk-related modification. Heck, even Sonya had some in the form of his black-scaled arms, and his pointed ears, nails, and teeth, but he was just expecting to look upon a human face when he turned around. When he realized that he was staring, Sonya averted his eyes in embarrassment. "Sorry, you startled me," he admitted. "Yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about me." The fellow student relaxed slightly, knowing that he did no harm. "Glad to hear. I'm Takoyami Fumikage," he introduced himself. Sonya knew that it was impolite to not introduce himself back, but he didn't want to give out his surname. He lived the last 5 years with that name looming over him, wrapping itself around his very being like a chain. He wasn't ashamed of his family nor his parents, but Sonya hated the looks in people's eyes, the look someone would give a villain. "I'm Sonya, just Sonya," he introduced himself. It felt right. In fact, it almost felt lighter in a way. Takoyami nodded and turned to Kayano, expecting her to introduce herself as well. She stared at him blankly for a couple of seconds before narrowing her eyes. "There's no point in introducing myself. We aren't classmates yet, and I don't need any premature friends." Before either Sonya or Takoyami could speak again, an announcement was made by the school's entrance. "Kayano Saoko, come to the front to receive your instructions." The unmistakable voice of Present Mike called out. The two boys could clearly see her eye twitch in annoyance at the impeccable timing. She then briskly turned around and walked towards the front without saying another word, leaving the boys behind. As time passed by, Sonya talked with Takoyami more, finding himself enjoying his company. Surprisingly, Sonya found that they had similar tastes in fashion and some music, though Sonya generally preferred alternative rock to heavy metal. Neither of them were the talking type, so their conversation would sometimes drift into a comfortable silence. It was during this silence that Sonya heard his name being called out. "Yumeno Sonya, come to the front to receive your instructions." Takoyami blinked once, then twice, then he seemed to put the pieces together. Yumeno, that was the surname of Yumeno Sylvester, also known as the Villain Shade, ranked 4th on Japan's Most Wanted up until his arrest. Now that he was actually looking at Sonya, not that it was hard with how wide his eyes must have been, he didn't know why he didn't recognize him sooner. Sonya lowered his head with a sigh. He was hoping that perhaps he could keep this part a secret. Takoyami seemed like a cool guy just like Kirishima, but he knew how this went. Being a villain's son would be the only thing they'd talk about until he got fed up and decided to leave, making him look like the asshole rather than the kids bringing it up. "Shame, I kinda like this guy. He feels strong, right? Looks like it's my turn. It was nice meeting you," Sonya said with his more typically flat voice. He was turned away from Takoyami, but he could still feel his eyes on his back. He always did. When he made it up to the entrance, he was directed inside by the R-rated hero Midnight. They walked until there were stairs in front of them that went up in 2 hallways to either side. Midnight stopped suddenly and stuck her arm out to Sonya's right. "Your written exam will be held in Lecture Hall B, row 16, seat 33. It's the very last door on the left. Good luck in Plus Ultra." He knew that saying Plus Ultra was supposed to be uplifting to the students, but Sonya could help but notice the weariness forming in her voice. Perhaps doing this continuously for hundreds of students can take its toll. Sonya followed the hero's instructions and entered through the unexpectedly massive door. He gawked at the size of the room. It was big enough to fit at least a dozen houses in it. Shaking himself from his initial shock, Sonya looked towards the numbers on the sides of the rows until he made it to the 16th row, then counted down the seats until he reached number 33. Sonya squeezed himself between Kirishima and a person whom he didn't know. As he looked around the room, Sonya couldn't help but notice that everyone was sitting within groups made up of their schools, a fact that he only knew since he recognized a few of the faces from some of the multi-school events that he had participated in. He also noticed that his own group was sitting in alphabetical order. Ashido was first, then Kayano, then Kirishima, then he was last. Sonya didn't have time to think about it, however, since shortly after the exam had begun. He knew that he had studied everything and anything that could have possibly been on the exam. But with every question he answered, his anxiety grew. He had come so far, too far to fail now, but he couldn't help but second-guess himself with every scratch of his pencil. He finished just under an hour later, which was good since the exam was only supposed to take an hour. The second that the hour was up, a loud bell was set off, signaling the end of the written exam. Sonya waited patiently outside the doors of the giant city for the second phase of the test to begin. He knew that UA was the best hero school with all the best resources, but he never expected them to have built an entire city. The other applicants around him muttered in amazement, just as entranced as Sonya was. He now sported black track pants, with a light blue tee and black long sleeve, having changed before being bussed here to better move while fighting. His stomach was swirling with butterflies as he awaited for the gates to open, knowing that he only had 10 minutes to prove himself, or else everything he'd done before now would be for nothing. Sonya shook his head and pushed those thoughts to the back of his mind. There was no point in getting himself all riled up. Just as he was calming down, an exited voice came over the speakers. "Okay, start." The group of kids stood around like a bunch of deer in headlights as they looked toward the hero present Mike standing atop a wall of concrete. "What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run, run. The die has been cast, you know." Immediately, all of the kids ran headfirst towards the gates and into the urban area. Not wanting to get left behind, Sonya joined the crowd and ran inside as well. In a matter of seconds, chaos ensued. A robot smashed its way through the buildings, leaving a cloud of dust and debris behind, and started going for a green-haired kid. It was destroyed almost immediately in a sparkling flash by another kid with a laser quirk. So it's just as Alina said, Sonya thought. Yes, finally, let's fight. Let me take them all out. Absolutely not. Please don't distract me. The immediate area around the gate was swarmed with robots of various points, and it soon turned into every man for himself with people fighting over points. Sonya was about to join the chaos when he had the sudden thought to dip out to his right and continue forward. If everyone is stuck out there, then there will be more for the rest of us further in. Sonya was quickly proven right when he turned to his left and instantly came face to face with a two-pointer. Instincts kicked in as he quickly jumped back in time to avoid being squashed by a massive metal arm that left the area where his body would have been in bits and pieces. Sonya felt the cold chill of his quirk run down his arm as he swung his hand forward, causing massive spikes of cloudy blue ice to burst forth from the ground and impale the robot, destroying it. He took a frosty breath, his heart still racing from that surprise attack. He calmed down quickly, collecting himself just as he was taught, and extended his arm, causing some of the ice that destroyed the robot to crumble and reform itself around Sonya's hand into the shape of a pole with a pointed end. This time, he would be ready for any surprises. Sonya continued to scout around for more robots, destroying any that he'd come across. At almost the 7-minute mark, Sonya had just destroyed another one-pointer when he was suddenly tackled to the ground by a familiar head of black hair, the area behind them being completely destroyed. Kirishima tackled the robot and raised both of his fists up high, activating his hardening quirk before smashing his fists into the robot, destroying it by concaving its back. He then jumped off the dead robot and jogged over to Sonya, his hand extended. "You all right?" he asked. Sonya was about to answer when he suddenly pulled Kirishima to the ground, a large projectile going overhead. Sonya spun as he stood up, using his body as an axis to wind up his pole as he threw it as hard as he could. The pole traveled quickly, leaving a trail of ice throughout the street as it hit its mark. The ice pole expanded as it hit, causing spikes of ice to force its way out the back of the robot as it fell to the ground. Kirishima watched in awe, having never seen Sonya fully use his quirk before. "That's amazing, dude," Kirishima said in awe before turning back to the street. "It's a good thing this isn't a real invasion. I mean, if this were a real battle, the owners and stuff would be pissed," Kirishima joked. A light bulb went off in Sonya's head. "You may be right about that. Maybe we need to think of this as a real fight rather than just a test. I mean, if they just wanted to test us based off of our quirks, why would they put us in an urban setting rather than an arena or a gym?" He muttered to himself, unaware that he was talking out loud. Sonya was startled out of his muttering with Kirishima's excitation. "Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. A real hero wouldn't be destroying things if they're supposed to protect the city. he added. Sonya was about to respond when a sudden rumbling and an explosion caught their attention. In the distance, the two boys felt their stomachs drop when they saw the massive skyscraper-sized robot emerge from the ground and punch at the street, causing another ripple in the ground. Sonya acted fast and created a shield device to stop the flying debris from hitting the people around him. What would a hero do in this situation? He thought to himself, ignoring every nerve in his body, activating his fight or flight response. Sonya looked down towards his hands. His fingers were almost completely covered in a dark frost from holding the pole for so long, and he could feel the frost on his chest spreading outwards, a sign that he should stop using his quirk before he overworks himself. If I can't fight that thing, then I can at least get people out of its way. He started to run towards the giant of a robot, running against the sea of people who were desperately trying to flee in the other direction. He spotted a horse-looking girl being trampled by the fleeing crowd. Sonya maneuvered his way through the crowd of people and lifted her up by the arm. "Are you okay? Can you still run?" he asked her. She nodded her head in a daze and joined the crowd as they continued to run. Sonya continued to move towards the robot until he saw another kid with drill-looking hair struggling to stand. "Are you hurt?" Sonya asked as he ran towards him. I think I messed up my foot." He winced in obvious pain. Sonya lifted him up and put his arm around his neck to support him as they jogged away from the scene. Sonya looked back as they left and saw that there were still two more people close to the robot, the green-haired kid and a girl with a stuck leg. "Crap, they're too close, I can't get to them," he cursed in his head. As Sonya despaired, out of nowhere the green-haired kid launched himself into the sky faster than the eye could see, the wind from his kick leaving the crowd of onlookers breathless and wide-eyed as they watched the assumed-to-be helpless kid throw a punch so powerful that the robot crumbled like paper. The gust of wind from the impact shattered the surrounding windows, literally knocking the onlookers off their feet. Sonya gulped as he saw the boy fall. So this is what I'll be up against in UA. The exam was over, and Sonya lay on his bed exhausted from all the fighting. He had been patched up and given gummies by an old lady, but he couldn't enjoy the sweet treat with the sour taste in his mouth. He only got 21 points before his quirk started acting up again. Sonya knew he shouldn't have practiced with his quirk beforehand because of this very reason, but he was just so restless and wanted to be sure that he was prepared. Sonya knew his quirk, Blue Ice, was difficult to control, and he also knew that stronger quirks came with more drawbacks. But he couldn't help but feel that he hadn't improved at all since he came to live with Sirius. Sonya raised his hand over his head with a grimace. There were still flakes of ice at the tips despite the exam ending hours ago. Letting out a frustrated sigh, Sonya rolled over and shoved his hands under his pillows to warm them up some more, unintentionally falling asleep due to exhaustion. A week passed, and Sonya checked the mail for the 5th time that day. His letter from UA should be arriving any day now, and he was dying from anticipation. He looked at his phone and contemplated texting his siblings, especially Alina and Valentin, but decided against it, wanting to wait until after the news arrived to tell his siblings and dads. Sirius came back after dinner, something that wasn't out of the norm, and the two of them were watching an old science fiction movie. He always had an odd taste in movies. "I like them. Really? Yeah, I like the alien. She's just trying to protect her territory. Why am I not surprised?" Sirius suddenly decided to pause the movie and look toward the door as if he'd heard something. Curious, Sonya listened towards the door and heard the unmistakable sound of someone opening the mailbox. Sirius was about to stand up to get it when Sonya jumped over the couch and sprinted towards the door, swinging it open to see a wide-eyed mailman about to put his UA letter in the mailbox. Sonya snatched the letter out of his hands and said a quick thank you before slamming the door in the terrified mailman's face. "It's here," Sonya exclaimed excitedly as he ran back towards his brother. Sirius looked just as excited as his brother as he beckoned him towards the couch to open the letter. They both looked at each other and nodded as they both took the wax seal and removed it. Sonya could see the little recording device that determined his fate for the rest of his life. The sudden realization made Sonya let go of the envelope and hide his head in his hands, confusing his brother. I can't look," he said through muffled hands. "PFFF, coward." Sirius huffed and took out the device himself. "Seriously? You can fight a dozen killer robots no problem, but you're scared of a little recording," he plainly scolded. The device was placed on the table, and a holographic screen came on, causing Sonya to lower his hands and look in awe of UA's technology. On the screen was the principal of UA, Principal 𝗍𝗂. "Hello, Yumeno Sonya. I am Principal 𝗍𝗂 of UA High School," he started. Sonya peeked out through his hands to see the mouse-like principal on the screen. "As you know, the exam to get into UA was split into 2 parts, the written exam and the practical exam. In the written exam, you scored in the top 19%. Fantastic job." Sonya lowered his hands in relief as his brother gave him a congratulatory pat on the back, his stress leaving him like an uncoiled spring. "However, you only gained 21 points from the practical exam, which was in the bottom 72% of all applicants." And now that Coil grew a fist and punched him straight in the gut, causing Sonya to drop his head and cover his face once again, letting out a sound of both pain and disappointment. Or at least, that would be the case if destroying robots was our only system for applying points. Our examiners not only graded you on villain points, but also rescue points. The video then cut to a recording of Sonya first protecting Kirishima, putting his body in front of his schoolmates, then of him protecting those around him with a shield, then finally of him running into the crowd of people to help those who were injured before cutting back to Principal Nezu. Your heroic spirit to help those in need didn't escape the eyes of the examiners, and you were awarded 45 rescue points, bringing your total up to 66. That means you ranked 5th overall. Sonya stood up in astonishment. Did this mean, congratulations on passing the UA entrance exam. We look forward to seeing you in Class 1A in the new school year. Good luck in Plus Ultra. The recording ended, leaving the two brothers in a stunned silence. They looked at the disc, then at each other. Sirius jumped up and engulfed his younger brother in a giant hug, almost knocking them both to the ground. You got in, Sony. Got him. I'm so proud right now. I can't believe he would pause like that. I thought I totally flunked it. I know. The two boys stopped to laugh. Sonya was filled with more joy than he'd felt in years. He actually got in. It felt like he had proved everyone wrong. His peers, his teachers, everyone thought he couldn't do it. But here he was, Class 1A, the best of the best. Sirius stopped the hug and backed away towards the kitchen, confusing Sonya. Hold on, I got something for you, he said as he disappeared around the corner. Sonya waited curiously while Sirius was getting Sonya's present. There was a consenting bout of crashing, banging, and cursing coming from the kitchen, and Sonya is sure that he saw a tin comically roll by. Soon after, Sirius came back out with a small box and placed it on the table. Sonya was touched. Despite not knowing if he was going to pass, his brother had such faith in him that he would go out and buy him a congratulatory gift. Sonya opened the box to see his very favorite dessert, a chocolate lava cake topped with powdered sugar and chocolate drizzle that spelled out a sentence. Who needs to go to that shitty school anyways? Ah, that made more sense. Smooth move, rock star. Sirius paled and forced the cake out of Sonya's hands in a panic, throwing it over his shoulder in the process. I wait, shit. Hold on, he stuttered, rushing back to the kitchen before coming out with another box. This time the cake read, congratulations. I knew you could do it. Sonya stared blankly at his brother, with only the slightest amount of judgment seeping through. Sirius had his head down, his fingers pinching the bridge of his nose at his own stupidity. Sonya sighed with a smile and patted his brother on the shoulder, snapping him out of his self-pity trance. Thanks, Sirius. This is a great gift. And the best part is that you got enough for the both of us. Confused, Sirius looked up to see Sonya pointing at the other end of the room. Following his finger, Sirius was now looking at the smashed cake against the wall. He rolled his eyes with a chuckle and walked over to the wall. Yeah, I deserve that, he spoke lightheartedly. Mel let out a whistle. Wow, you're even worse than I am, sonny boy. Fortunately, the cake was still in its box. Unfortunately, the cake was smashed to bits, the gooey inside splattering all over the inside of the box like a bad trip to the bathroom. But cake was still cake nonetheless, and Sirius grabbed a spoon and sat down with his brother. They talked about old times while they ate, reminiscing about their family and how far they all had come. When all was done, Sonya went back to his room and placed his acceptance letter on the desk, and took a picture, sending it to the family group chat. Then he sat down and brought out a pen and piece of paper and started writing a letter to his dads, and he didn't want to leave out a single detail. Sonya stood outside the gates of UA, just as starstruck today as he was the first time he was here. Crossing the threshold felt like a dream, and yet here he was, doing it with such ease. He walked down the halls of the school, trying to find his class. He quickly found himself standing outside a comically large door with 1A painted as giant numbers. Well, that's convenient, Mel spoke as he reached for the handle. Sonya held his breath as he opened the door, wondering who his classmates would be. When he saw the classroom, he noted that there were 7 other people in the room. The explosion guy who got first place, 𝗳𝗏, a girl with plugs for ears that he didn't recognize, and most notably, Keanu, Mina, Kirishima, whose hair was now all red and spiky, and Takoyami. Kirishima was the first person to notice him, his face lighting up as Sonya entered the classroom. He waved his hand in a beckoning motion, and Sonya stepped forward in his direction, meeting him in the middle. Bro, it's so cool that we all got in, he exclaimed, holding out his hand for a fist bump. Sonya hesitated, not used to this sort of friendly treatment, but reciprocated the fist bump. Yeah, I heard you got second place overall. That's no easy feat, Sonya praised, though his face and tone were mostly unexpressive. I blew it. Turns out you were totally right about that secret secondary score. 𝗧𝗓, who couldn't help but overhear their conversation, decided to inject himself into their conversation. He walked over, rather robotically Sonya noted, and began to introduce himself. Hello, I am from 𝗬𝗵𝗲 Private Academy. My name is 𝗂𝗃. I apologize for listening in on your conversation. But is it true that you realized there was something more to the practical exam? Sonya scratched his scales with his nails in bashfulness. Kinda. I really only put 2 and 2 together after Kirishima noted all the destruction we were causing. It made me wonder why we were put into a situation that allowed destruction at all. If they just wanted to just test our quirks, then they would have put us in a more controlled setting. The fact that they had those robots to play villains implied that we were meant to play hero, so I just did what I thought a hero would do. 𝗂𝗃 placed his hand to his chin and though. I see. That is truly very wise. I have much that I must still learn. Sonya shook his head and crossed his arms. It's really not. I was just raised to question everything. It's more of an ingrained thing than a wisdom or skill. Oh yeah, you were raised by villains, right? That Yumeno guy that did all those robberies? Kirishima asked. Sonya knew that it was innocent, but he couldn't help but hold in a flinch at the mention of his dad. Ouch, way to rip off that band-aid. 𝗂𝗃 was surprised to hear that name. He was too young to remember the arrest, but he had heard all about it from his brother. Sylvester Yumeno and his partner Kota Kurai both committed over 300 bank robberies during their 20 years in Japan and were suspected of smuggling, kidnapping, and the murder of a former hero, though there was no evidence for anything but the robberies and some fraud. They were the 4th most wanted villains at the time of their arrest and had to be kept at Tartarus. 𝗂𝗃 knew that they had kids. There was a controversy when one became a sidekick to a pro hero just last year, but he would have never guessed that he would get to meet one. Sonya looked away and crossed his arms, feeling his quirk send a chill through his body at the emotions he was feeling. Yep, I'm Yumeno Sonya, raised by villains. It gives you a certain set of skills. They taught me a lot of what I know. Sonya forced his face to be blank as he watched the facial expressions of his 2 classmates. Kirishima didn't seem to mind all that much, his face more curious than judgmental. Sonya appreciated that. 𝗂𝗃, however, seemed to be deep in thought, processing what he had just learned. If he says anything, I can shut him up for you. That's not necessary, Mel. Just let him finish. 𝗂𝗃 seemed to finish processing, his fist hitting his hand. I see. So you used your perspective and experience with villainous tactics and applied them in a heroic manner. That is admirable, Yumeno. Sonya was visibly taken back. No one had ever put it like that before. Whenever he had tried to use what he had learned at school, he'd always gotten in trouble and his brother had to be called. To have it be called admirable, it felt nice. However, 𝗂𝗃 started again, swinging his hand in a chopping motion. I have noticed that you are not wearing the proper US school uniform. All those who have changes made to their uniform must bring a permission slip signed by the principal. If you haven't done that already, then I suggest that you do so before class starts. Sonya was in fact wearing a modified version of the US school uniform. Instead of the typical gray and green jacket, he wore a gray knit sweater and a black high-neck long sleeve under the white button-up tee. Sonya, half expecting this, dug into his pockets and pulled out a small piece of paper with a red stamp of approval on it. He had asked for a change via the school email rather than in person, so he had gotten the signed slip in the mail. It's already signed. My quirk doesn't allow for me to regulate my temperature properly, so I have to wear warmer clothes to stop myself from freezing, Sonya explained. In one swift moment, 𝗂𝗃 retracted his hand and bowed an apology. My apologies. I was too quick to assume. What a square. The conversation died and 𝗂𝗃 went to go introduce himself to the other classmates who were slowly trickling in. Sonya took his seat at seat 22, right next to a smart-looking ponytail girl. She didn't look his way, more so taking in the entire classroom. A commotion had started between 𝗂𝗃 and the explosion dude, but Sonya ignored it, deciding instead to look out the window until class started. Ugh, this place is so boring. How could you choose this over freedom? There's no freedom in being a villain, unless you also want to end up in Tartarus like our dads. Mel stayed silent, but Sonya could hear the annoyance in his grumbling. Sonya resumed his window watching when an unexpected voice snatched his attention. Go somewhere else if you want to play at being friends. Sonya was startled to hear such a dreary voice, automatically knowing that it couldn't be coming from a fellow student. Everyone looked past the door where 3 classmates were standing and behind them, where a thing was lying on the ground. This is the hero course, it spoke lazily, slurping at some sort of food packet. Sonya felt weirdly unnerved. It stood up and started to unzip, like a moth coming out of its cocoon, revealing a very scraggly and very tired-looking man. Sonya couldn't help but relate. Mood, Mel, please. Okay, it took you 8 seconds before you were quiet, he spoke again. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. It was easy to come to the conclusion that this guy was his teacher, but Sonya couldn't see this guy teaching anything other than how to make a room full of children feel mildly uncomfortable. The teacher looked around the room at all his students, his face unchanging from his lazy attitude. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you. The class was in shock. This guy was their homeroom teacher, but Sonya was more focused on the same, Shota Aizawa. That name seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember from where. He was brought back to the moment by his teacher speaking once again. It's kind of sudden, but put this on and go out onto the field. He pulled a tracksuit out of his sleeping bag with the 𝐒𝐲 logo on it. Clearly they were going to be doing exercise on the very first day. Not what Sonya expected, but that's just how it is, he thought. Everyone changed into their respective tracksuits and headed out to the field where their teacher was already waiting, now sporting his full hero costume. Once they were all there, he explained to the class that they would be doing a quirk assessment test. A quirk assessment test? The class parroted. What about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? 𝗂𝗏𝗄 asked. Sonya lightly shook his head, and he could see the ponytail girl who sat beside him do the same. None of those two things could accurately show the capabilities of a quirk due to the chaotic and changing nature of those events. To see the current strengths and potential of one's quirk, they have to be tested in a fixed environment. He remembered being a child, his dads and doctors making him to a quirk assessment test every 3 months until their arrest. We hated those. You always pretended to be sick when it was assessment day. Sonya chose to stay silent, though, and let the teacher explain. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. 𝐻𝐻's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. Aizawa paused to turn around, facing the class. You kids have been doing these since junior high, too, right? He brought out his phone with a list of exercises, physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The country still uses averages taken from results from students not using their quirks. It's not rational. Well, the Ministry of Education is procrastinating. The teacher turned to face the explosion dude. Sonya still couldn't remember his name. 𝗂𝗏𝗄, you finished at the top of the practical exam, right? In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? 67 meters, he answered skeptically. Then try doing it with your quirk. 𝗂𝗏𝗄 moved to the center of the ring for the throw, ball in hand, and waited impatiently for instructions. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Aizawa explained. Hurry up, give it all you've got. Then, well, 𝗂𝗏𝗄 stretched his arms before lining up the ball with his throw. His face changed expressions to a wicked smile as he threw, detonating his hand and causing the ball to fly out of his hand like a bullet. Die, he shouted as the ball flew into the air, a rather unhero-like catchphrase if Sonya could say so. Know your own maximum first. Aizawa spoke again as the class watched the ball fade from their eyesight. The ball hit the ground, and the phone beeped, calculating the distance it had been thrown. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. He held up the phone, revealing the distance to be 705.2 meters. The class let out a collective gasp of surprise. That was almost a quarter away from a kilometer. Sonya almost wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. Looks like I'm going to have to step up my game, Sonya thought to himself, a newfound determination brewing inside him. The whole class erupted in both praise and questions about the hero course. It hadn't really occurred to any of them that they would be allowed to actually use their quirks in school. Though if you really thought about it, it would be pretty stupid if they couldn't. While all that was happening, Aizawa took on a more dark tone of voice. It looks fun, huh? You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Their teacher shifted to have a more sinister-looking face, a look that was enhanced by his bloodshot eyes. All right, whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion. There was yet another collective gasp from the class, including Sonya. Expulsion? There was no way he could actually do that. Right, their teacher decided to explain for them. We're free to do what we want about the circumstances of our students. Welcome to 𝐻𝐻's hero course. Sonya's face hardened. So this is what it's like at such an elite school. He shouldn't have underestimated them. Sonya knew now that he'd have to work at least twice as hard to obtain his goal, and it all started with this test. However, some of his classmates weren't happy with this explanation. Last place will be expelled, 𝗂𝗏𝗄 cried out. But it's only the first day of school. No, even if it weren't the first day of school, this is too unfair. Aizawa responded in a blunt tone. Natural disasters, big accidents, and selfish villains. Calamities whose time and place can't be predicted. Japan is covered in unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. If you wanted to go talk to your friends at Mickey D's after school, too bad. For the next 3 years, you will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond, plus ultra. Overcome it with all you've got. They all knew that their teacher was right. Sonya mulled over his words on what it takes to be a hero. Big accidents, selfish villains. Those were all things that he had the unfortunate case of experiencing, and not ones that he would wish on anyone else. Sonya wanted to be a hero to face those who have gone through such hardships, the same ones that he was forced to endure, and tell someone else that they will be okay. Sonya felt his quirk flow throughout his body in response to his emotion. He crossed his arms at the cold, ready to face whatever challenges were awaiting him. If it's a quirk test, then you should let me know. You know why I can't let you, Mel? I'm sorry, 𝗬𝗧𝗏, you can't keep me in here forever. I know, just not yet, I promise. Alright, demonstration's over. The real thing starts now. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Ada and the frog girl were up first. Sonya watched closely as the robotic voice counted them down. He wanted to get a better look at everyone's abilities, mostly to see how he compares, but also because he was genuinely curious. The robot made a fake gunshot sound, and the two were off, Ada obviously in the lead. He breezed by the 50 meters, leaving a trail of dust in his wake. Frog girl followed behind, taking 58 seconds. Well, it's obvious who's gonna win this round, he thought bluntly. However, what he failed to notice is that he didn't think it. He said it out loud, in front of other people. You said it. How can we compete with the guy who has literal engines in his legs? Kirishima added, startling Sonya out of his thoughts for the second time. Not everyone has speed-related quirks. This thing is totally rigged. Hearing his complaint, Ada walked over in a robotic manner, something that Sonya was starting to assume was normal for him. There's no need for any of that, he announced, outstretching his arm in a chopping manner towards the redhead boy. The various tests are split up into multiple parts so that everyone gets their chance to shine. I'm sure that there will be something that you excel in that I do not. Kirishima looked visibly relieved and a lot more pumped up at the explanation. That's a relief. If it was all running stuff, I'm sure I'd come in last place. Ada nodded vigorously before turning his head towards Sonya, making a chopping motion again. I hope that you have permission to be wearing. Sonya cut him off by taking out a second permission slip from his pocket, almost as if he was expecting this. Ada reacted immediately, bowing his head low. I apologize for my quick assumptions, he all but yelled. Sonya waved his hand dismissively. It's fine, he assured. Kirishima glanced over at Sonya. He noticed that his friend was wearing a black long sleeve and leggings under his tracksuit, something that he somehow hadn't noticed before. It must suck being so cold all the time. I can't imagine having to wear a sweater in the summer, Kirishima added, feeling a bit bad for him. The frog girl came over and entered the conversation, pointing at Sonya's hands. Is that why you wear those gloves, 𝗧𝗏? Sonya looked down at his hands, confused. He didn't wear gloves. He raised his hand up and immediately came to the realization that he was talking about the black scales on his hands. Oh, that's not a glove. My hands are just covered in small scales. I get it from my parents, I think. Sonya pinched the skin on his hand to prove his point. Frog girl stepped forward and held out her hand. Can I feel them, 𝗧𝗏? Bewildered by the question, Sonya put his hand in hers, muttering a small sure as he did so. She felt his hands with her much larger ones. It's so soft, 𝗧𝗏. It doesn't feel like scales at all, she stated, a bit surprised. Sonya didn't remove his hand, but was trying to be extra mindful of his sharp nails. That's because they're very small and thin, less like a snake and more like a butterfly. They don't really add any extra protection, he explained. She nodded in understanding. I'm a 𝗬𝗧𝗍, but you can call me 𝗬. My name's Yumeno Sonya, but I prefer Sonya over Yumeno. Sonya replied, no longer caring if people knew his family name. They were all in a class together anyway. If worse came to worse, he could just ignore them until graduating. It's nice to meet you, Sonya-chan. Sonya was a bit taken back by the honorific, definitely not expecting it, but she seemed like the say what's on your mind blunt type. He respected that. His name was then called, signaling that it was his turn for the dash. He went up to the start line and found himself beside Keanu, who paid him no mind. As the countdown started, Sonya made himself a platform of ice that hovered slightly off the ground. The gunshot sounded and they were both off, Keanu using her strength and Sonya riding his ice like a skateboard. Sonya finished in 4:21 seconds, much better than if he was just running. Keanu finished close behind at 4:89 seconds, testing at her score, hoping that it would be better. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 Quirk, great white shark. She can do all the things a shark can do, including swimming with her powerful tail, breathing underwater, and having a powerful bite. Watch out for her teeth. Sonya went back to the group he was in. This time, Mina went up to him first. Super cool, Sonya. I didn't know you could do that. It was like, F-wish. Then a whoosh. Sonya rubbed the back of his neck bashfully. Well, he was cut off by a glacial sound. Todoroki behind him propelling himself across the track in 3:91 seconds using a wall of ice, leaving the onlookers dumbstruck. Mina turned back to Sonya, no longer looking that impressed. Dude, why didn't you just do that? I had no idea that was an option. Loser. Test 2, grip strength. Sonya held the device in his hand, knowing that this wasn't going to look good for him. There's no way to use his quirk to help him here. He squeezed and hoped for the best. The device beeped and Sonya looked down. 72 kilograms. Not bad, above average even, but compared to his classmates. Sonya looked to his left where Keanu stood. Her device beeped, and Sonya stood wide-eyed at her 291 kilograms. She looked over at him and smirked, causing Sonya to gulp. No handshakes with her test 3. Standing long jump. Sonya took note of those who went before him, once again using his ice to fly his way across the sand. He watched as 𝐂𝐚𝐲 wasn't so lucky, falling into the sand after an overshot jump. Why did it feel like it was turning into a contest? You'd better win. If you lose to Sharky, I'll never forgive you. Test 3. Repeated sidesteps. Sonya could do very little to boost his performance in comparison to 𝐂𝐚𝐲, whose natural strength was much greater than his own. She outdid his performance with ease, giving him that same smirk. Sonya wondered if she knew that they weren't competing. Not that he had much of a choice. Test 4. Ball throw. Sonya stood on the sidelines as he watched the others throw the ball. This was one of the tests that Sonya was looking forward to the most. He knew that this was his chance to stand out. He doubted he could beat Bakugo's record, but he didn't dismiss second place. Uraraka was up on the circle, activating her quirk before throwing the soft ball. It went up, and up, and up still, until it was gone from everyone's view. Aizawa held out his phone, revealing the infinity sign. The entire class was flabbergasted, including Sonya himself. Maybe he could settle for third place. Next was Midoriya, the green-haired bone-breaking kid. Out of all the tests so far, Sonya noticed that he was the only one not using his quirk. But then again, he'd also be reluctant to use his quirk if he was in excruciatingly pain every time he used his quirk. Perhaps, Sonya thought, that maybe his body was incompatible with his abilities. Sonya could sympathize with that. He knew the feeling all too well. Midoriya looked reluctant, staring down at the ball for a while before collecting himself and winding up his arm. His quirk activated and he threw in. It plopped down just shy of 50 meters away. Midoriya looked confused, and rightfully so. Had his quirk backfired? But then the reason became apparent. Aizawa's scarves floated, along with his hair, his eyes red. Something inside Sonya clicked. Aizawa showed her the scarves. His was Eraserhead. Sonya looked on with wide eyes. There was no way this strange guy was his second favorite hero. Oh man, never meet your heroes. Oh crap, I hope he doesn't see the handmade Eraserhead goggle patch I have on my jacket. I think I'd die of shame, Sonya thought to himself. Mel snickered in his head. I'd pay good money to see that. I'd die on the spot. The two looked like they talked for a bit, though it wasn't clear if it was teacherly advice or corporal punishment. Midoriya went back to his place in the circle, and like a new person had taken his place, Midoriya was suddenly able to throw with a sonic boom, launching the ball 705.3 meters. Fourth place was looking really good right about now. Everyone cheered for Midoriya, whose finger was now swollen and broken. Sonya honestly felt relieved that he was able to excel in something. He got over 700 meters. Kirishima yelled. Ochako chimed in with a cheer and 2 thumbs up. Finally, a hero-like record. His fingers swollen. There was the entrance exam too. He has a very strange quirk. Ida added it's not very stylish, stated a flashy guy Sonya didn't notice before. Sonya felt the need to add his own 2 cents. I'm glad for him. Poor guy really needed a break. Ah, wait. Mel said nothing, but burst out laughing in his head. The ringing laughter in his ears didn't make the situation any better. Kaminari snickered and placed an elbow on Sonya's shoulder. I think he got enough of a break right there. Sonya pulled his shirt closer to his face, now feeling abashed and wanting to hide. Speaking was never his strong suit. He was about to reply when a furious Bakugo started running towards Midoriya, cursing and detonating his hands. Sonya was honestly glad that he wasn't on the receiving end of that. It looked almost terrifying. His assault was stopped by their teacher, who at this point looked completely done with their shit. Geez, he practically spat. Don't keep making me use my quirk over and over. I have dry eye. After complaining, he deactivated his quirk and put away his scarf. We're wasting time. Whoever's next, get ready. Sonya had the displeasure of it being his turn. His throw felt obsolete compared to the drama that just ensued. But still, Sonya gathered his resolve as he picked up the ball. He was used to ignoring others' opinions. He could do it again. He wanted that second place, even if it seemed unobtainable. Sonya didn't want to use too much of his power, knowing that he'd have a harder time with the rest of his tests. But this entire thing was made to test his quirk. To not put in 100% even once was shameful. Sonya decided he was going to put it all into this throw. He tossed the ball in his hand, getting a good sense of the weight before measuring the wind. He did the math in his head to get the perfect throwing angle, and then he made a plan. He crafted ice around the ball into the shape of a spear with the ball resting in the middle. He spun the spear around as he wound up his arm, stepping slightly backwards. The moment his foot hit the ground, ice shot out from his feet behind his as his quirk activated, a chill shooting through his body. A gust of freezing air emanated from himself, and ice began to form under his feet. He lined up his shot, knowing that he could only control the spear up to 300 meters away from his body. Finally, he threw, ice crystals shooting off behind him from the recoil. He forced the spear to keep ascending upwards, gaining speed as he did so, before it reached the 300-meter mark and was in gravity's control. It kept going until it was out of sight, now only having his teacher's phone to rely on. There was a beep, and Sonya held his breath. 802. 9 meters. Sonya let out a sigh of relief, letting his body relax and shaking out his now frosty arm. He did it, and that's all he really cared about. Test 5. Sit-ups. Sonya's body really didn't like him right now, having practically frozen his right arm, and now doing more exercise. His body would slap him if he had the ability. 𝐒𝐻𝐽 wins this round. Test 6. Seated toe touch. Now this he could definitely do. Sonya trained his body to be very flexible, preferring his quirk to have all the power while his body had the mobility. He flattened his body against the ground, doing far more than touching his toes. 𝐒𝐻𝐽 was having trouble, her body being more muscular. Point for Sonya. Test 7. Long distance run. This was the tiebreaker, and one hell of a tiebreaker too. Putting a long distance run at the very end of a physical test, when everyone would already be tired and beaten. Now that's cold, and Sonya knew cold. Unfortunately for 𝐒𝐻𝐽, Sonya just wasn't tired. Compared to his stamina-consuming quirk, this was a cakewalk. When the test was over, everyone gathered by the teacher, waiting for their results in bated breath. Sonya stood beside 𝐒𝐻𝐽, neither speaking or looking at each other. The energy between them felt strange, like their 𝐈𝐵𝐴𝐿𝐼 chemistry was on pause, its future to be determined by the outcome of this test. Okay, I'll quickly tell you the results. Aizawa explained the marks of the test. The total is simply the marks you got from each test. It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you the results all at once. He clicked a button on a holographic device revealing the scores of all the students. Sonya scanned down the list for his own name, and for his kinda sorta maybe rivals. Sonya was relieved when he saw his name in 7th place, not that he was surprised. If he had come in the bottom half after his ball throw, then the whole thing was rigged. Looking down a little further, he could see 𝐒𝐻𝐽 come in 9th. He turned to see the shark girl, who narrowed her eyes and turned away with a tisk, crossing her arm. The chemistry of their strange relationship was back in motion, unchanging. Sonya couldn't help but wonder if something could have changed if the roles were reversed. The scores stayed up for a few moments later before Aizawa shut them off. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion. Oh, right. Sonya had forgotten about that. It was a logical ruse to draw out the upper limits of your quirks, he explained with a weird smile. Most of the class was in an uproar, except for the smart-looking girl, who spoke up about the whole thing. Of course that was a lie. It should have been obvious if you just thought it through. Now that he thought of it, if just one of us got expelled, it would make team-up exercises harder in the future, having an uneven number of students and all. Sonya mumbled to himself. Takoyami put his hand to his chin. If that were the case, then someone would have to go twice to even it out, he finished. They'd still have 22 if they counted me. I think they only count bodies, not entities. Sorry, Mel. Whatever, they're missing out. That was still a little nerve-wracking. Huh? Zero piped up. Kirishima clenched his fist, clearly still pumped up. I'll take up the challenge anytime. Aizawa looked like he was done with the class at this point. With that, we're done here. There are handouts with the curriculum and such in the classroom, so when you get back, look them over. He walked over to the side of the building and disappeared, leaving his students behind. Oh, is that it? Sonya was on his way home, the rest of the day being rather uneventful compared to the quirk assessment test. Just as he was about to cross over to his street, he changed his mind, deciding instead to go the other way to his brother's work. Sonya knew that Sirius would feel bad for being away during his first day at U. After walking for a few minutes, Sonya stood outside his brother's garage, 2 cars already in the shop to be repaired. Sonya just about entered the building when a familiar voice stopped him. Halt, small trespasser. A familiar head of red hair popped out from behind a desk. You're gonna need some ID. He leaned over on the desk with his hand out, a telling smug smile. Sonya rolled his eyes and took out his UA student ID, knowing that was what he wanted to see. The redhead 𝐻𝐽 took the ID and mimed taking out a pair of glasses, inspecting the card. Yep, looks legit, kid. You may pass. 𝐂𝐽 quirk, crystal growth. 𝐂𝐽 can turn parts of his body into salmon red-colored crystals and can change their shape to some degree. 𝐻𝐽 was then hit on the head by a screw flicked his way, causing him to drop the card back into Sonya's hand. A woman appeared from around a corner with a raised eyebrow and crossed arms. Don't tease the kid, 𝐻𝐽. He came all this way to see us, so just let him in. Don't be a dick about it. 𝐭𝐲𝐿 Kaneko quirk. Little dragon 𝐭𝐲𝐿 can turn herself into a 2-foot-long serpent-like furred dragon. She has all the basic abilities of a dragon, strength, flight, and can breathe fire, but on a more proportional scale. She can't talk as a dragon. Sonya put up his hand dismissively. It's fine. Is Sirius still in? Kaneko pointed to the back of the garage wordlessly. Sonya thanked her and ventured deeper into the workspace, the smell of metal and oil filling his nose. He followed the sound of clanking metal until he saw half a body sticking out from under a car. Boy, metalhead, Sonya called out, kicking the side of his brother's leg. Sony bang. 𝗃𝗍𝗵𝗲, Sirius cursed, hitting his head as he rolled out from under the vehicle. Yumeno Sirius Quirk. Liquid metal. He can turn any metal into a liquid-like state, shape it, and then return it to its solid metal form. Sonya was standing over his brother, a stupid-looking grin on his face at his brother's misfortune. Sirius fully stood up, his clothes and face covered in grease and grime from working all day. He should have been mad, but he let it slide. This time, you know you don't have to censor yourself around me. Vin alone could out-curse everyone in our family combined. Sonya spoke plainly. Sirius made a subtle face at the mention of Vin. Vin was Sirius's younger brother and Sonya's older brother. Out of all their many siblings of various career choices, Vin was the one who followed in their parents' footsteps the most. He was 100% a full-fledged villain. Even if no one could compile any evidence against him, it was a fact that everyone knew. Not a murderer or a thief, but an alleged weapon and support item smuggler. Sirius sighed. If I didn't watch myself, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 would never let me hear the end of it. Even now, I can hear him mocking me. I would never dare to ever curse in front of my own sibling. This is why the court let me take Luca instead of you. For shame, Sirius, for shame. He spoke in an exaggerated manner. Sonya snorted a laugh, knowing that it honestly wasn't that off from how 𝗵𝗃𝗲 usually spoke. He also didn't miss the not-so-subtle jab at the fact that 𝗵𝗃𝗲 of all people got custody of Luca. Sonya knew that his brother was bitter about not getting his little sister, Luca, and especially since 𝗵𝗃𝗲 was probably the least mature person in the family, tied only with Valentin, who was a literal teenager. That's just what being financially successful will do, I guess. Sirius finished his performance and patted his brother on the shoulder. I just got some more work to do, then we can head home early. You don't mind waiting? Not at all. I'll just wait in the office. Oi, who said we get to go home early? 𝗂𝐻𝐸 called out. I did. I'm the boss. I say we go home early today. Sirius replied, getting back to his work. Fuck ya ho, 𝗏𝗏𝐿. What the hell, oh? Stop cursing around the kid, or I'll give you something to curse about. You should show them what real cursing sounds like. You know, like this. Sonya ignored Mel with a grimace, making his way to the office. He sat down in the spinning office chair and kicked his feet up in the desk, placing his bag on the floor beside him. He took out his phone and decided that the best way to pass the time was on the family group chat. All this family talk was making him sentimental. He took out his phone and snapped a picture of his ID and sent it to the family group chat. Ice baby image, first day at UA Luca. Congratulations 𝗵𝗃𝗲, fantastic job Sony. We all knew that you were gonna make it. Valentin, blink, why are you looking at me? I was rooting for you too. Sonya, you have to believe me. Ice baby, I do. Blink, you're my precious baby brother. Don't let 𝗵𝗃𝗲 corrupt you. Alina Shadden, really good job Sonya. Tanya thinks so too. She got a new phone, but I'm sure she'll call you soon. Ice baby, thank you Alina. Sirius told me about your experience with the entrance exam and it really helped a lot, so thank you. Divided by Alina Shadden. No need to thank me. I didn't do anything. Weather girl, so sweet Sonya. Think you could get me into UA for an interview? My boss would love it. Ice baby, I'm not allowed to do that. 𝗵𝗃𝗲, don't peer pressure him Lubella. He's too young for the spotlight. Luca, don't act like you're any better. 𝗵𝗃𝗲, Luca, betrayal. Victor, good job. Kid, Ice baby, thanks. Vic, I really appreciate it. Blink, hey. Don't ignore me. Blink Sonya. Blink, that's cold. Sonya chuckled lightly. His family was chaotic, but he loved them all the same, and their praise at his achievement made his chest flutter with happiness. Even Victor responds to a text 2 weeks later with a K managed to respond on time. Sonya was about to turn off his phone and chill out, but then he remembered something. Leaving the family chat, he then entered another private chat, one with his brother Vin, or 𝗧𝗍 as he liked to be called now. Ice baby. Image, just finished my first day at UA. It was pretty cool. D==BSA. That's awesome Sonny. You're gonna be a super cool hero. Got a name yet? Ice baby. Not yet. Still thinking about that one. 𝗧𝗍 good. Cause I have a few. Frostbite, Hailstorm, Obsidian, Harbinger, Winter, Hellion, Riven, Cryo, Frost, Hoarfrost, Rime, Verglas, Boreal, Frostbound, Permafrost, Tempest, Blizzard, Tauren. Ice baby. Wow, that's a lot. You've really put a lot of though into this 𝗧𝗍. Stygian, Dire, Veil, Arcane, Dusk, Revenant, Darken, Scylla, Boreas, Scatty, Hotter, Fern. Ice baby. I think that's enough there 𝗧𝗍, but I have so much more. Ice baby, that's all right. I have to go now, but you can send me an email 𝗧𝗍 if you say so. Talk to you later Sonny. Remember to stop by sometime. Sonya switched off his phone, not really having to go anywhere, but he knew that 𝗧𝗍 would go on forever if he didn't stop him. Despite the fact that he was a villain, he was still supportive of Sonya and was the one rooting for him the most, even if the others couldn't see it. Vin was somewhat of a taboo topic within his family, with some like Tanya and Lubella cutting off all contact and shutting down any conversation about him, and those like Valentin and Sirius, who will only talk to Vin if he contacts them first. Sonya was the only one out of his 8 non-Vin siblings to keep contact with him, and sometimes he didn't know if that was a good or bad thing. Sonya spent the next couple of minutes browsing social media, looking at cute animals. All Might saving the day again. More cute animals. Sonya mostly looked at the animals. After a couple of minutes he felt his brother tap him on the shoulder, all finished and ready to go. They waved goodbye to the other two and started walking back home, Sirius asking about how his day went. It was good. There are some cool people there. There was someone from the Ida family. And Endeavor's kid too. Sirius whistled, impressed by the turnout. Damn, looks like you're gonna have some serious competition. Sonya hummed in agreement. So, how does Mel feel about all this? Sirius asked, his tone more careful than before. You'd be better off as a so-called villain, but whatever. As long as it isn't boring, I don't care. Mel spoke in a flippish tone. He's coming around to it, Sonya translated. Sirius paused before asking his next question. Has he come out recently? No, Sonya sighed as he heard Mel scoff in his head. I don't think it would be a good idea right now. I can't control my quirk well enough to risk it. I can control it just fine. Sirius patted his brother's head in sympathy. I figured, but look on the bright side. Now that you're at a super awesome and cool school, I'm sure you'll learn to control it in no time. The two saw their home appear in the distance, finally ready to rest after such an eventful day. Sonya let his brother's words echo in his mind as he walked through the front door. He really hoped that he was right. The second day of school started out pretty normal for Sonya, the UA curriculum having normal classes in the morning, like English and maths, then lunch in the cafeteria that was made by the Hero Lunch Rush, though Sonya typically brought his own lunch to save a little bit of money. Then, in the afternoon was the heroics classes, the ones that Mel was looking forward to the most. So for the entrance exam, we fought killer robots. For the first day we had a contest. It wasn't a contest, so what do you think we'll do today? More robots. I hope it's more robots. It's not going to be more robots. Before an argument could start, there was a booming voice coming from just beyond the classroom doors. I am coming through the door like a normal person. With a rush of air, the classroom door slid open, revealing All Might in all his glory. He was notably wearing an older costume, though Sonya couldn't tell you which one. The young boy was left staring in awe, having somewhat forgotten that the All Might was going to be teaching at his school. The hero marched up to the front desk as the students whispered in wonder to each other, being just as excited to be taught by the #1 hero. All Might placed his hands on his hips heroically and started talking. I teach hero basic training. It is a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basics of being a hero. You'll take the most units of this subject. Let's get it right into it. This is what we'll do today, combat training. He pulled out a card with the word battle written on it. Sonya could feel Mel's excitement in his quirk, which sent an exited chill through his body. He'd be lying if he said that he didn't feel the same. All Might spoke again. And to go with that are these. Out from the wall came rows of numbered metal suitcases, costumes made based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started. After you change, gather in ground beta. Everyone grabbed their respective cases and made their way to the change rooms before heading out to ground beta. Sonya moved around while waiting for everyone to finish, testing out his suit. The coat was nice, allowing for mobility while also keeping him warm. It was black with a blue inside in a long trench coat style, stylized in an almost techwear fashion. The suit itself was tight but movable, and made out of some sort of warm material. It was black with light blue-colored mist patterns on the outside of the legs in a traditional Japanese pattern. The suit itself inspired by one of his favorite old mecha anime, even with his quirk running through his body. He didn't shiver. The chest harness was more Mel's idea, having leather and chains hang in a way that resembled a ribcage. He had made up some excuse about them before, but Sonya had honestly forgotten. He assumed that they were just there for aesthetic purposes. The only issue that Sonya had was with the boots, which had metal claws to help with traction while walking on his ice. They were loud and kinda hard to walk in. Sonya made a note to ask for some changes in the future. This whole suit thing is so boring. Make them add more pizzazz next time. Sure thing. He looked around the grounds, looking at everyone else's costumes. There were a wide variety. Ada's practicality, Kaminari's style, Ayama's. Whatever he had going on. Kayano was just wearing a stylized navy and teal-colored wetsuit. Was Hagakure naked? Sonya averted his eyes. Even if he couldn't see her, he knew that it was rude to look at someone in the nude. How was that even allowed? Sonya was snapped out of his thoughts by All Might. That's great, everyone. You all look so cool. Sonya felt a faint smile spread across his face, and he raised a hand to hide it. All Might thinks we look cool. He was talking to everyone, dumbass. Shush Mel. All Might spoke again, his voice powerful and triumphant. Now, shall we begin, you zygotes? Now, it's time for combat training. Sensei, Ida immediately put up his hand. This is a battle center from the entrance exam, so will we be conducting urban battles again? No, we're going to move ahead 2 steps. All Might replied just as fast. Most of the time, fighting villains takes place outside. But if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate, like robbing a bank. Not the time, imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. For this class, you'll be split into villains and heroes and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles, without basic training. Sue asked, this is a real battle to understand those basics. However, the key this time is that there's no robot you can just beat up. How will wins and losses be determined? Yaoyorozu cut in. Can we beat them up anyway? Bakugo added. Will the punishment be expulsion like with Aizawa-sensei? Ochako asked. How shall we be split up? Ida also added. Isn't this cape crazy? Aoyama raised his sparkly cape. I'll answer all your questions, All Might announced, looking quite overwhelmed. He brought out a tiny script, probably given to him by the school, and began to read from it. The situation is that the villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in their hideout. The heroes are trying to dispose of that. The heroes need to catch the villains or get the nuclear weapon back in the allotted time. The villains need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time or catch the heroes. All Might then brought out a yellow box with the word lots written on it in English. Teams and opponents will be determined by drawing lots. They're being decided so haphazardly. Ida asked, a bit astonished. Midoriya decided to answer his question. Pros often have to create makeshift teams with heroes from other agencies, so maybe that's why. Sonya also added in his answer. Besides, none of us know each other very well. This is only our 2nd day of school. Even if we were to form our own teams, it would still be a bit haphazard. Plus, those who do know each other, or came from the same schools, would obviously team up and give themselves an unfair advantage. I see. The discernment to look ahead. Please excuse my rudeness. Ida bowed apologetically. It's fine. Let's do this quickly. Sonya drew a lot from the box. Opening the folded paper revealed that he was on Team H. He looked around. It looked like most other people had already found their partners. As he was going to go ask around, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning around revealed Sue holding up a paper that also had an H on it. Looks like we're partners, Karo. Sonya was relieved. He was worried that he'd have to team up with either Keanu or Bakugo. He just couldn't help but dislike those angry competitive types. Just when he was about to respond, Takoyami entered the conversation. Also holding up an H, there seemed to be 3 of us. He spoke, confused. Sonya raised his hand at his teacher. Sensei, there seem to be 3 of us in the same team. Is this a mistake? He asked. All Might wagged his finger in their direction. Not at all. 22 students doesn't divide perfectly into groups of 4, so there will be 2 groups of 3 that will face each other. Will the other group of 3 please raise their hands? Kirishima, Shiro, and Keanu all raised their hands, making Sonya deflate. Of course it was Keanu. Why wouldn't it be Keanu? Sonya didn't believe in the supernatural, but right now he was starting to think he was cursed. When the first 2 teams were decided, everyone was directed towards the monitor room. It was dark, with a bunch of monitors watching the building from many different places and angles. No matter how many times he saw it, Sonya was always in awe of the technology. At you All Might used the microphone to announce to the 2 teams. Now, let's start the indoor person-to-person combat training with Team A and Team D. His voice echoed through the building. Everyone watched intently as the hero team entered the building. All Might once again spoke, this time to the remaining class. Okay, everyone, you all should think as well. For a while nothing happened, just Tima sneaking around the building. Then, out of nowhere, Bakugo came swinging in, causing an explosion and the other 2 to fall back. Sonya watched as some talking went on between them, but there was no audio so they couldn't tell what was going on. You know, if you're going up against 3 people, I could always know. Sonya replied instantly. Mel tusked, getting tired of hearing that answer. I don't even have to take over. I can just help out externally. Come on Sonya, I need this. I need the action. Mel pleaded. It wasn't every day that Mel begged for something. Sonya paused, no longer paying attention to the screen. Having Mel would give them a slight edge, but he couldn't let Mel take over. That was too dangerous. Sonya could remember what happened the first time Mel took over. He still had the scar on his back to prove it. But if he was just going to help out externally, fine, you can help out, but you can't take over, not yet. Fuck yeah, I'll take it. Let's go crack some skulls. Is it too late to take it back? You can bet your ass it is. Sonya sighed, already regretting to this agreement. The very concept of Mel's being was going to require a lot of explanation. The only people who knew of Mel were his family. Not that he intended to keep him a secret. It's just a tad strange feeling to have to explain to people that there's a sentient voice in his head that tells him to do violent things to people and calls for destruction and chaos. Sonya was brought back by a bright flash on one of the screens. 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 had just released a massive explosion that destroyed much of the floor he was on. Sonya grimaced. That would definitely take points off their overall score. The explosion caused the ground to shake, and the students to cry out in shock. "Sensei, you should really stop them. That 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁's really crazy. He's gonna kill him," Kirishima stressed. "No," All Might raised the microphone. "Young 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁, the next time you use that, I'll stop the fight and your team will lose. To attack on such a large scale inside is inviting the destruction of the stronghold you should be protecting. That is a foolish plan for both heroes and villains. You will lose a lot of points for it." 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 didn't look happy about that. In fact, he looked downright pissed. He lunged at Midoriya, who tried to fight back, but 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 flipped over him using his explosions, hitting him square in the back. Sonya had to admit, even though he was a fight-crazy lunatic, he was definitely intelligent and very strategic. The relentless attacks came, and they didn't stop coming, beating Midoriya down time and time again. It was hard to watch, but no one could look away. Midoriya ran. Not that he could blame the poor guy, but having a closer look revealed that he wasn't running away in fear, but running with purpose. He stopped at a wall, faced 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁, and they both lunged at each other. It looked like Midoriya would retaliate, but then he changed his aim, punching upwards and letting himself get hit. The force caused the punch to go through every single floor in the building, and allowed Uraraka to pelt to debris at Iida, causing him to protect himself and allowing her to float to the weapon. It was over, the time was up. The class could only stare in stunned silence at the events that just unfolded. All Might was silent for a moment, then spoke into the microphone. Hero team wins. In the aftermath, All Might himself went down to the wreckage, a medical robot following behind ready to take Midoriya to the nurse's office. The non-broken teammates came back to the monitor room, ready to be assessed for their performance. All Might was of course the first one to start. "Well, even if I say that, the MVP for this battle was young 𝗧𝗏." Said boy looked surprised at the notion that he, a part of the losing team, would be awarded the title of MVP. The other classmates seemed to express the same feeling. "It's not either of the winners, Ochako or Midoriya," Sue asked. Well, why is that? Does anyone know?" All Might asked the class. Ieyasu raised her hand. "Yes, All Might sensei. It's because Iida adapted the most to the context of the training. From watching the match, it appears 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗁 acted on his own because of an obviously personal grudge. And as All Might sensei said earlier, it is foolish to launch a large-scale attack indoors. In the same way, taking into consideration the damage he received, Midoriya's plan was also rash. As for Uraraka, she let her guard down mid-battle, and her final attack was too reckless. If she treated the paper mache as a real weapon, she would not have been able to do something so dangerous. Iida had prepared for his opponent's arrival and assumed it would be a fight over the weapon, which made him late in responding to the final attack. The hero team only won because they took advantage of the fact that this was training. They were practically breaking the rules. "Oh wow," Sonya stared at Ieyasu in stunned silence. That was so much more than he had picked up on. Though to be fair, he did get distracted by Mel for half of it. This essay of an assessment gave Sonya a new motivation. Don't mess it up, or you'll get absolutely degraded by Ieyasu in front of the whole class. Even All Might wasn't prepared for her response. Well, young Iida also has parts of him that could be more relaxed. But well, that was correct. Ieyasu continued. "We should always start with the basics to develop depth of learning. We must strive to devote ourselves wholeheartedly. Otherwise, we cannot become top heroes." After that little speech, Sonya almost felt enlightened. After that they changed locations, having Todoroki and Shoji go up against Anjiro and Hagakure. The second battle started with a loud buzzer, and Shoji used his quirk to scout ahead. The two talked for a second, then Todoroki placed his hand on the wall and froze the whole building. Sonya was gobsmacked. There was no way he'd be able to do that with his ice, at least not without freezing his whole arm. Todoroki calmly walked up to the weapon, having frozen the two villains in place, and placed his hand on the paper craft. The room was freezing. Everyone was shivering aside from Sonya himself. Why aren't you CC cold?" Mina asked with chattering teeth. Sonya shrugged nonchalantly. "My ice is colder, I'm used to it." It was one of the only things he had against Todoroki's ice. Not that it counted for much. Mina pointed a finger at him accusingly, her arms shaking. "And no fair." All Might, who was also shivering, commented on the win of the hero team. He did not cause any damage to his teammate or the nuclear weapon. And on top of that, he weakened the enemy. Todoroki then placed his other hand on the weapon, and the ice started melting away into water and vapor. Did he have two quirks? After the assessment, which expectedly went by quickly, it was Sonya and his team's turn. They were to be the hero team while the others were the villains. Sonya took out a black metal mask that covered the lower half of his face and put it on, as well as retying his hair into a bun to get ready for the battle ahead. The trio sat outside the building that they would be infiltrating in 5 minutes with their teammates, looking over the floor plan for the building. He looked over at his teammate and resisted the urge to sigh. It was about time he had to tell his teammates about his complicated quirk and about 𝗼. Before we make some sort of plan, I think it would be best for us to tell each other our quirks and abilities, Sonya suggested, easing himself into the explanation. Agreed, Takoyami nodded. It would be better for us to know each other's abilities, so we can better assist each other in the battle. Sue also nodded. Kero, I'll go first. I can do all the things a frog can do. I can jump really far, and I can extend my tongue really far too. I can also climb on walls, and I can eject my stomach and wash it, but I don't think that will come in handy. You, Takoyami went next. My ability is called Dark Shadow. He paused, allowing the shadow to form from his body. Dark Shadow is powered by darkness. The darker it is, the more powerful he becomes, but the less control I have over him. If it becomes too dark, I will lose control and he will rampage indiscriminately. Gee, why does that sound familiar? Oh, shut it, you. It was Sonya's turn. He placed his head on his palm and let out a dejected breath, not really wanting to explain. My quirk is called Blue Ice. I can create and manipulate this ice from my body, though my drawbacks limit my usage. Why is it called Blue Ice if your ice isn't blue? It looks more black or gray, Sue asked, her finger against her lip. Blue ice is just the type of ice I make. It's more compressed than regular ice, which makes the ice crystals enlarge and makes it stronger and harder to melt. The black and gray look comes from the volcanic particles embedded in my ice. Sonya pauses to create a small chunk of ice in his hand, holding it up to the sun. They're made from things like volcanic glass, obsidian, and a bunch of other stuff I don't remember. When I manipulate my ice, I'm not actually manipulating the ice itself, but rather the particles inside the ice. Plus, Sonya sucked in a breath and placed a hand on his chest, slowly pulling outwards. From his chest came a second ice crystal that began to float around his head. However, this one was different. It floated in a more organic manner and pulsated with a soft light. This is 𝗼, Sonya started again. 𝗼 is basically the personification of my quirk. He has his own thoughts, feelings, and morals, which are unfortunately not exactly heroic. He can talk, but only I can hear him. I'd go into more detail, but we're running out of time. That sounds complicated, Sue added bluntly. It is, it's exhausting. Literally, my quirk makes me tired. It's not ideal. Takoyami placed his hand to his beak, in contemplation, trying to come up with a plan. Do you think it's possible to freeze the whole building like Todoroki did? He asked. Kero, if I stay in cold temperatures, I start to hibernate. Sue vetoed that idea. Could you use Dark Shadow to see through the windows and find out where the weapon is? I cannot. Dark Shadow wouldn't have the strength to do that in the sunlight. Sonya shook his head. If one of us stayed outside, Keano would be able to tell. Her shark quirk gives her a very keen nose. Unless... The buzzer went off, signaling the beginning of the battle. Up on the 4th floor, 𝗧𝗏 taped up the area around the weapon like a spider web, aiming to trap anyone who dares step into the room. Keano sniffed the air, smelling 3 new scents enter the building. They're here. 1st floor, she relayed to her teammates. She was about to leave to go fight the intruders when Kirishima placed his hand on her shoulder. Oi, wait. We should all stay here. If you leave, it will be a 3-on-1 battle. And we don't know much about the enemy, he reasoned. Keano clicked her tongue, her shark tail flicking in annoyance as she leaned against a pillar in compliance. She used her tracking capabilities to keep track of the hero team, relaying info to her team in increments. On the outside of the building, however, Sonya used his ice as a board to glide around to the windows, his jacket missing from his body. He glanced around the last window on the 3rd floor and contacted his teammates. All clear. He spoke into the earpiece. Understood, his teammates replied back. Sonya made his way to the 4th floor, 𝗼 floating by his side. He crouched right under a window and looked at 𝗼, pointing upwards. 𝗼 floated up to the window and paused. See anything? Sonya asked. Nope, he replied simply. They moved to the next window. Here? No. What about here? Nada. Here, this is so boring. 𝗼, fine. No one here. He whined. They moved to the next window. Sonya was about to ask the same question when 𝗼 interrupted. Oi. They're in here. Sonya immediately reached for his communicator, informing his other teammates. They're all in the northeast corner room. 𝗧𝗏 has the entire area taped up. The other 2 nodded, racing up to the corner, knowing that Keano will know that they're coming. With the villain team, Keano's face changed to one of surprise, kicking off the pillar to get a better smell. They're coming, and fast. They know where we are, she explained in a serious tone. What? How could they possibly know that? 𝗧𝗏 asked, astonished. Keano hissed. I'm not a psychic. However they found us, Kirishima spoke, his body hardening. We'll be ready for them. They readied themselves for any surprise as they heard the footsteps of their opponents come closer and closer. Then it all stopped. The air was tense. The villain team could only hear their own breathing and heartbeats ringing in their ears. Then everything happened in slow motion. Tokoyami and Tsuyu turned the corner, ready to fight. Keano was the only one to notice that Sonya wasn't there, and that Tsuyu was wearing his jacket. She reacted, turning to face the windows, but couldn't react fast enough to stop the ice boy from breaking the window he was under, sending pelts of ice at the overhead lights. Keano charged at Sonya as he entered the window, her superior strength and speed not letting Sonya move in time. He raised his hand to block, but Mel moved first, changing his form to shield Sonya from the attack. "Take this fucker out." Sonya didn't reply, but ducked down, forming a pole of ice in his hands. He spun to gain some momentum and struck her in the stomach, causing her to double over. Meanwhile, Tokoyami used the darkness to his advantage, using dark shadow to tear through the tape in their path and making way for Tsuyu to leap across the room. Both 𝐬𝐸 and Kirishima rushed to stop her, but Kirishima's was stopped by Tokoyami and dark shadow. 𝐬𝐸 fired tape at Tsuyu, but it was blocked by Sonya, the tape wrapping around his pole. He tugged hard, causing 𝐬𝐸 to fly towards him, and without hesitation he took 𝐬𝐸 down with another gut strike. Seconds later, Tsuyu landed on the weapon, causing the end of the battle. All Might's voice rang out from the speakers. "Hero team wins." Sonya dropped his pole and reached out to 𝐬𝐸, who lay crumpled on the floor. He picked the boy up by the arm and helped him walk back to the monitor room for assessment. Tsuyu did the same for Keano, who glared at him with the rage of 1,000 suns. They entered the room and lined up, Keano and 𝐬𝐸 still hunched over from the blow. "I'll give the class a chance to share their own opinions about this battle," All Might announced, but it really just sounded like he wanted the class to do that job for him. Once again, Yaoyorozu raised her hand, leaving the rest of the class relieved that they wouldn't have to answer. The hero team did well formulating a plan to counter the tracking abilities of the villains, and played well to counter the known abilities and strengths of the villains. The villains also did well securing the weapon in a fixed location and keeping track of the heroes. However, the strategy that the heroes implement to find the weapon was inefficient. If the villains had decided to stall them, go for a frontal attack, or if they had been on the 5th floor, they would have run out of time. And the villains were much too lax and unprepared. They spent all their time in waiting and they got caught off guard, and it cost them their victory. She ended. "Why yes, very well said, young Yaoyorozu." All Might praised. Sonya sighed in relief. They may have been trashed for one thing, but they also got praised for two things. It's as they say, 2 steps forward and 1 step back is still 1 step forward. 𝐬𝐸 then groaned, raising his hand to interject. That blow to the gut was also unnecessary. He strained. "You couldn't have done anything else." "Well, if I hit you in the ribs, then I would have broken your bones. And that seemed even more unnecessary." Sonya spoke blankly, as if that was a perfectly normal thing a person would say. "Well, on to the next round." All Might cheered, steering away from the growing awkwardness. Next up was Team C versus Team G. Yaoyorozu and Minato versus Gyro and Kaminari. Watching the match begin to unfold, Sonya couldn't tell who he felt more bad for. The two who had to fight against Yaoyorozu, or the lady herself who was teamed up with Minato, who was constantly staring at her butt. It looked like the hero team was planning some sort of surprise attack, with Gyro using her ears to listen for the enemy. Sonya watched the match on the screen, subconsciously scratching at his scales once again. He flinched when he heard a small crack and something clattered to the floor. Thinking that he had literally scratched the scales off his hands, Sonya brought his hand to his face, and was relieved to see that he had just scratched off the bit of frost growing from his fingers. He hadn't even noticed it before, but now that he had, the boy could feel the chilling cold running through his hands, and it was annoying. If only there were a way to. Oh, Sonya had an idea, a bad one that wouldn't work, but an idea nonetheless. He scanned the room for the person he was looking for, and when he found him, he walked over and tapped him on the shoulder. Todoroki turned, saying nothing. "I know that this is a super weird request, but I saw you melt your ice during your run. Do you think that you could melt mine?" Sonya asked, holding up his frost-covered hands. Without words, but with hesitation, Todoroki lifted his left arm to Sonya's own and produced a wave of heat. He waited for the ice to melt, but nothing happened. Lowering his hand revealed that the ice had barely retreated, stubbornly staying on the boy's hands. His eyes narrowed slightly, but Sonya only sighed and waved his hands with a shrug. "I knew it," he mumbled to himself. "Sorry about that. It's not a skill issue on your end. My ice is just really hard to melt. It's a whole thing. Thanks for trying anyways." Sonya finished, shoving his hands in his pockets. There was a silence between them for a moment. Then Todoroki spoke. "So you also have an ice quirk?" "Yep. Do we have to be rivals now or something?" "I'd rather not do something so stupid." "Me neither." And that was the end of the conversation. It was also the end of the battle, with Yaoyorozu and Minato being crowned the winners. They had planned for Gyro and Kaminari to try and stun them through the metal door, and added insulation to the bars blocking the door. After Kaminari stupidified himself, Gyro was captured using Minato's sticky hair. A flawless victory for the student. Next up was Team F, Kota and Sato versus Mina and Aoyama. Mina and 𝐂𝐽𝐺 won, if barely, and with many mistakes. Not that the villain team did much better. It was honestly the second most chaotic battle. No points for guessing the first. At least it makes for good entertainment. I hope that they learn from this. At the end of the battles, when everyone was assessed and awarded points, they all gathered by the ground entrance around All Might, who gave another speech. Great work, everyone. We didn't have any major injuries other than young Midoriya, either. You guys took this on seriously. You all did a good job on your first training, he praised. Sue raised her hand to talk. To have such a proper class after Mr. Aizawa's class, it's kind of anticlimactic, she noted. The rest of the class nodded in agreement. All Right outstretched his arms in a heroic pose. We're free to have proper classes as well. Well then, I must review the results with young Midoriya. Change and return to the classroom, he announced, running off at speed so fast it left a gust of wind and dust in his wake. The classroom was left in awe of his presence and power. They all put back on their school uniforms and Sonya undid his hair. Mel decided to stay out for a while longer. Not typically one to be let out for this long, he was still excited and giddy. They all went back to the classroom to await being dismissed. Sonya first going to sit back in his seat, but decided to join one of the groups that were forming. He went with Takoyami, who was with Ajiro and Gyro. Maybe it would be fun to socialize again. He approached the group, raising his hand to do a small wave. That's what kids still did, right? Takoyami nodded. Ajiro waved back, and Gyro just looked up, not saying anything. Crazy class today, huh? He started. He very quickly came to the conclusion that small talk wasn't his strong suit. Takoyami nodded. I agree. I didn't think we'd be going against each other so soon. It got pretty intense with that first one too, Gyro added. I honestly thought someone was going to die on our second day, Ajiro admitted. Sonya shook his head. Even though he keeps telling everyone how much wants to kill them, he was very careful to avoid fatal injury. Debilitating injury on the other hand. How could you tell? Ajiro asked. I know Todoroki would know because of Endeavor. Is it like a villain thing? Like analyzing hero fighting and stuff? Sonya raised an eyebrow. Villain thing, he parroted. I'm not a villain though. He crossed his arms in defiance. Ajiro became flustered. I heard Kirishima say that your parents, they Sorry, that was a stupid thing to say. Sonya loosened himself up, letting out a breath. It's fine. I get it. Not many people really understand the whole villain parents, hero child thing. But thanks for the apology. Ajiro seemed to let out a sigh of relief, glad that his classmate wouldn't hold a grudge against his ignorance. Sonya decided to answer his question. I have a bunch of siblings, and 2 of them ended up going to Shiatsu. They used to let me sit in and watch while they trained and stuff. My sister just graduated last year actually. She got a cool sidekick job with Edshot. Gyro snapped her fingers, recognizing the situation Sonya described. Hey, I think I heard of that. Her hero name was like Shady or something, right? Shadden, yeah. That's my sister, Sonya said with pride. Wow, that's cool. I can't believe you guys are siblings. You don't look alike at all. No offense. Sonya passively waved his hand. None taken. Me and all my siblings are adopted, so it'd be weirder if we did look alike. They were cut off from whatever reaction they were going to have by Kirishima's surprised voice. Oh, Midoriya's here. Everyone started to crowd around the kid with a broken arm. Good work. Man, I don't know what you were saying during the match, but you were fired up. I can't believe you fought evenly with Bakugo, who was first in the entrance exam. Siro added. You did a good job dodging. Ashido complimented, her hands pumped in excitement. You guys did that in the first match, so the rest of us had to give it our all, too, said Sato. Aoyama appeared from behind Mina. His hands cradled his face. You were far from elegant, but you did a good job dodging. Ashido added once again, jumping up and down, and completely cutting off Aoyama. Midoriya looked completely flustered at the attention while everyone introduced themselves, wanting to know the Bone Breaker Kid. It started with Kirishima, who introduced himself first, and then invited Midoriya to go training together with many of the other classmates. They all introduced themselves one by one, with Mina once again cutting off Aoyama. Even Tsu and Maida came to join the group. Sonya and the others stayed where they were, though listened to the crowd and watched the events unfold. You're too loud, Takoyami complained. Now sitting on the desk he was once just leaning on. Ada noticed immediately and robotically speed walked over to him. Takoyami, that desk is not a chair. Get off immediately, he commanded, waving his arms in every direction. What a square. It's not that big a deal, is it? Gyro dismissed. It's not like he's gonna break the thing, Sonya added. What's with those hands, anyway? Ajiro teased. Ada deflated, his waking arms stiff at his side. You people, I cannot condone actions that disrespect the desks the great men and women who are our upperclassmen once used. You're too loud, Takoyami complained once again. Kaminari and Ochako entered the room, with the latter immediately checking on the fractured boy's injuries. He left soon after in a hurry, chasing after presumably Bakugo. Sonya was approached by 𝗧𝗪 next, with the others behind him. Oi, Yumeno, we're all gonna go do some training later, you wanna come with us? Maybe you could show us how you did the spinny pole thing, he suggested. So you do want me to break your ribs? Sonya concluded, hitting his fist on his palm. I what? No, it was a joke. Oh. And with that, the second day ended. It was a good, if not chaotic day filled with surprises and a generous amount of all might. For the first time in a long time, as he walked out the front gates, Sonya actually found himself looking forward to another day of school. Just as he finished his sentence, there was a loud rumbling sound coming from just outside the school entrance. There was a person on a motorcycle sitting outside, waiting for someone. Speak of the devil, Sonya spoke. He picked up his bag and started walking out the door. It has started chopping his hands once again. Please use a helmet while going on such a vehicle, he called out. Don't worry, I have one. I don't have a permission slip this time, so you'll just have to trust me, he called back. And with that, the second day ended. It was a good, if not chaotic day filled with surprises and a generous amount of all might. For the first time in a long time, as he walked out the front gates, Sonya actually found himself looking forward to another day of school. Despite the fights, the broken bones, and the emotional turmoil, the friends and enemies made, the chaos of the school days passed. This day was without a doubt the most chaotic day of school yet. From the moment that Sonya was dropped off, he was swarmed by reporters trying to get the scoop on UA, and more specifically, All Might teaching there. He all but swam through the torrent of people asking him question after question, lapping over each other into an unintelligible mass of noise. Sonya lifted his bag and used it as a shield to move past all the reporters, ignoring all their invasive questions. Weren't there laws against this kind of thing? If they don't stop putting their fucking cameras in our faces, I'm gonna. Do not say anything else, Mel. I don't want to agree with you. As Sonya neared the saving grace of the school gates, his luck ran out and he tripped over what he didn't know. But what he did know was that he was about to be trampled to death by reporters who were too busy doing their job to care. Before he could hit the ground, someone caught the back of his shirt and lifted him from the ground. Well, if it isn't Mr. Yua himself, care to give me a quote? A cheery voice asked, placing him back on his feet. Surprised by the voice, Sonya turned to see his older sister Lubella holding a microphone in his direction, a cocky smile on her face. Yumeno Lubella Quirk. Foggy day. Lubella can take the moisture from the atmosphere into her hair and turn it into a fog. She can control the density of this fog and extend it up to 20 meters. What are you doing here? Sonya asked accusingly. Out of all his siblings, he had always gotten along with Lubella the least. Not that he didn't like her. He had no darkness in his heart towards any of his siblings, but she always managed to find a way to get under his skin. My job, my dear little brother. And you're gonna help me do it, she announced, striking a pose. No, Sonya started to walk away when Lubella grabbed his arm, stopping him. Just you wait right there, mister. I still need a quote from you. How does it feel having All Might as a teacher? She shoved the microphone in her brother's face, her cameraman doing the same. Sonya used his finger to tentatively move the microphone away and took a step back. I feel like my sister is using her job to harass me at school. And if she doesn't stop, I'm going to report her to her boss for abuse of power and misuse of company equipment. That enough of a quote for you. Sonya walked off, now much more annoyed than he wanted to be. Lubella looked back at her cameraman with a more humbled-looking face. Cut that part out, will ya? She said with a throat-slicing motion. Sonya started walking back towards the gates when a different familiar voice caught his attention, though one that was much more muffled. He dove his hand into the sea of people and pulled out a tuft of yellow hair. Kaminari, figures. Another big pull let the poor boy out of the grasp of the reporters, and he dragged him limply by the arm across the gate into safety. After that, Sonya let go, staying just long enough to make sure he would fall over, and then kept walking. After gathering his bearings, Kaminari shook off his stupor and ran to catch up with his savior. Thanks dude, for saving me and stuff. No problem, reporters are a pain to deal with, trust me, he grumbled. He would definitely be complaining about this in the family group chat. Haha, yeah, sure. Kaminari's laughed awkwardly. They fell into a silence, one that Sonya was perfectly fine with, and one that Kaminari wanted to run away from. He didn't feel good about it. He thought that Sonya might kinda sorta be a chill dude. But he overheard what Ojiro said about him and his family. Being the kid of villains was some real shit, and Kaminari didn't want to be mixed up in that kind of stuff. On the other hand, Sonya found himself struggling to find something to talk about. He preferred silence most of the time, but things seemed to be going so well at UA with the whole friends thing. He really felt like the people here were so much more understanding of his situation in comparison to junior high. He had to constantly drop friends like flies because of their persistent ignorance. I liked your hero costume, is what Sonya landed on. It was the truth after all. Kaminari looked at him in weary surprise, but turned to an awkward smile. Really, is that so? Yeah, it's pretty rocker. Looks like something my brother would wear out riding his motorcycle. Kaminari honestly couldn't tell if he was joking or not. He looked at his classmate's face, but it didn't help. His face was almost always blank, and it made reading the guy even harder. Maybe that was one of the reasons he freaked Kaminari out. Motorcycle, huh? Your brother sounds like a cool dude. Sonya let out a rare smile. Yeah, he really is. Kaminari was still staring, despite how weary he wanted to be. He had to admit he didn't really look like a villain right now. He looked normal. They walked to class together, first talking about cool jackets they like, and somehow ending at the best hamburger place in the area. I'm telling you, the way they cook the meat is perfection, and their special secret sauce is to die for, Kaminari explained as they walked through the class. Sonya nodded along, taking his words seriously. I see. You'll have to show me some time. Only if you're buying. Ghio, Zero, and Ashido were the first ones to greet them to class, both sitting by the front desks. You two seem to be getting along well, Ashido commented. Yeah, especially for someone who thought that Yumeno was a scary guy, Zero teased. Kaminari made a face and started frantically waving his hands around. What? No, I didn't. I said that he was scary cool, yeah. He defended himself, obviously lying. Ashido came up behind him and grasped his shoulders, causing Kaminari to jump. Oh ho ho, so you're saying you never said that he was a scary guy with scary-looking eyes that could freeze me on the spot? Lies and slander. Sonya rolled his eyes. He probably should have found it insulting, but he found it more funny than anything. It's fine, I'm not offended. Kaminari looked relieved. Then Sonya continued, but if you really want to make it up to me, then you're buying. He poked Kaminari in the chest for emphasis. The kids continued their conversation, which seemed to switch topics every 30 seconds or so. Eventually class was about to start and they all made their way to their seats, just in time for Aizawa to arrive. Good work on yesterday's combat training. I saw the video and results. Bakugo, you're talented, so don't act like a kid. I know, he responded. Even from the back of the class, Sonya could still feel his annoyance. And Midoriya, you settled it by breaking your arm again, huh? You can't keep saying you can't help it because you can't control your quirk. I don't like saying the same thing over and over. As long as you fix the control issue, there's a lot you'll be able to do. Feel a sense of urgency, Midoriya. Yes, sensei. Now let's get down to homeroom business. Aizawa continued. Sorry about the late notice, but today I'll have you decide on a class representative. Sonya blinked. That was so normal in comparison to all the crazy tests and exercises they've had to do over the last couple of days. Finding a class representative seemed so unreal. Immediately hands were flying up with people begging to become the rep. I want to be class rep. Pick me. Kirishima yelled, me too, I want to do it, too. It's a job made for M. I'll be the leader. My manifesto is for all girls' skirts to be 30 centimeters above the knee. Gross, Sonya thought, giving a disgusted look towards Minta. Let me do it. Me. Throughout all the chaos, a single voice made them pause. Silence, please everyone. Ada commanded the class. It's a job with serious responsibility of leading others. It's not a job for just anyone who wants to do it. It is a calling that requires the trust of those around you. If we want to use democracy to decide on a true leader, then we should hold an election to choose one. He explained. Ironically, his hand was the one raised the highest. Kirishima voiced his concerns. Why would you suggest that? We haven't known each other for that long, so how can we have trust or anything? Tsu added. If that's the case, and everyone votes for themselves. Kirishima trailed off. Ida chopped his hands in their direction. Don't you think that is precisely why whoever receives multiple votes here can be truly considered the most suitable person? What do you think, Aizawa-sensei? Said Sensei was already in his yellow sleeping bag, zipping himself up. I don't care, as long as you decide before homeroom is over. He rolled over and laid down, looking like he intended to take a nap in the middle of class. Was that allowed? The class held their election, using ripped pieces of paper as ballets. Sonya looked around the room, deciding who he wanted to vote for. He most certainly didn't want to vote himself. The role honestly sounded too stressful and annoying to handle. You should just take it for yourself. Fight everyone here if you have to. Become their ruler, Mel yelled from inside his head. Look, if you want to constantly round up and chase after 21 or so other loud-ass rowdy teenagers every single day for the entire year, then be my guest. Mel shut up after that. After a bit of deciding, Sonya picked Ida for his ballet, despite the fact that he obviously wanted the place. He was the only one who understood the responsibilities that came with the position. He placed his ballet in the box and waited for the results to be written on the board. In first place was Midoriya Izuku, with Yaoyorozu Momo in second, placing them firmly as president and vice president. This seemed to come to a surprise to the green-haired boy, who exclaimed loudly, I got 3 votes. Why Deku, who voted for him? Bakugo shouted, standing from his desk. Sonya was also wondering that. He looked like a nervous mess. He was intelligent, yes, but not exactly a leader type. Looking more at the board, Sonya could see that aside from himself, no one else voted for 𝐻𝐻𝐵. He didn't seem to be taking it well, despite what he said. Well then, Aizawa spoke, waking up from his nap. The class rep is Midoriya, and the deputy rep will be Yaoyorozu. Asked seriously. Seriously? Midoriya was dumbfounded, standing in front of the class, shaking like an earthquake. Right after the president was elected, it was finally lunch time. Sonya got his tray of food from Lunch Rush and looked around for a place to sit. He preferred sitting alone, but this time it looked like most places were filled. Just throw them out of their seats if you want to sit alone. Mel retorted, I'm not doing that. I'll just go sit with someone else. Sonya looked around the lunchroom for someone he recognized. Just a couple tables down, he could see the recognizable horns of Mina, along with Tsu, Kirishima, and Keanu. Sonya looked around once more, not wanting to face the angry shark girl. His eyes just barely caught a hint of Puffball Green peeking out from behind a booth. He walked towards the new class president, and more importantly, away from Keanu. He walked up to the trio, Midoriya, 𝐻𝐻𝐵, and Uraraka, catching their attention away from their conversation. Could I sit here? He asked rather awkwardly. He was going to have to work on this. Before anyone could say anything, Uraraka gave a thumbs up. Of course, Yumeno. Midoriya slid over, giving Sonya some room. As more people came to the cafeteria to eat lunch, the sounds of food trays, utensils, and chatter became louder and louder. There are a bunch of people here today, too, Uraraka commented. Sonya had thought that it was more busy today than usual. That's because everyone in the hero course, support course, and management course meets in the same place. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 answered. The food was delicious, Sonya noted. As someone who often had to cook simple meals God himself, such good food was a rarity. His brother wasn't much of a cook and preferred picking up meals on his way home. And Sonya himself really just made the same 3 things over and over again. Now that he thought about it, the only good cooks in his family were Alina, Finn, and his other father Kirai, though one was in jail and the other was an active villain, so really it was only the one good cook. To Sonya's side, Midoriya looked down at his food in worry. Even though I've been chosen as class rep, I don't know if I'm qualified for it, he expressed. Uraraka cut in rather bluntly. You are. It'll be fine. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 added. Your courage and judgment at critical moments make you worth following. That's why I voted for you. Midoriya looked surprised, and so did Sonya. That was you, Midoriya expressed. But didn't you want to be class rep too, 𝐻𝐻𝐵? I mean, you've got glasses and everything, Uraraka asked between eating rice. What a 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said that one. Come up with something more creative. Wanting to do it and being suitable for it are different issues. I merely did what I judged to be correct, he explained, his voice sounding more fancy at the end, something that didn't go unnoticed by his classmates. Merely, you don't usually use that word. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 started to slip up, now catching his mistake. Oh, that's... He tried to backtrack, but it was no use. Uraraka leaned in closer, voicing her thought process. I've been thinking, are you a rich boy, 𝐻𝐻𝐵? That seemed to have hit the nail on the head, the boy in question pulling a face and sighing loudly. I tried to change how I talk because I didn't want to be called that. The 3 others at the table stared at him, waiting for his explanation. Sonya wouldn't be surprised if he came from money. It looked like quite a few people did in their class. Todoroki has that endeavor money rolling in. Yaoyorozu looked elegant enough to fit the criteria. And from the way that Aoyama flashed and sparkled all the time, you'd think he was covered in gold dust. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 sighed once more. Yes, my family has been heroes for generations. I'm the second son. What? Wow, do you know the turbo hero, Ingenium? 𝐻𝐻𝐵 continued. Of course I do, Midoriya exclaimed, though Sonya was a bit lost. He had definitely heard of the name before, but he had no idea who he was. He's a really popular hero who has 65 sidekicks working at his Tokyo agency. Don't tell me. He's my older brother, 𝐻𝐻𝐵 proclaimed proudly, striking a pose. He is a likable hero who honors the rules and leads people. I set my sights on being a hero because I want to be like my brother. However, I think it's still too soon for me to lead others unlike me. Midoriya realized the point of the practical portion of the entrance exam, so he's more suitable for the job. He ended with a smile. Sonya felt touched. He could really hear the admiration 𝐻𝐻𝐵 had for his older brother in his tone. He had definitely made the right decision in casting 𝐻𝐻𝐵's vote, even if he didn't win in the end. That might be the first time I've seen you smile, 𝐻𝐻𝐵, Uraraka commented, somewhat offending the poor boy. It looked like Midoriya had more to say, but the sudden sound of the school's alarm bell halted any thought they may have had. A voice over the intercoms explained the situation. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate outdoors promptly. Everyone started getting up from their seats and rushing towards the doors. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 turned to a fellow student in confusion. What is a level 3 security breach? It means that someone is trespassing on school grounds. I've never seen anything like this in the 3 years I've been here. You should hurry too, the upperclassman explained, rushing out of his chair. The hallway to the outside was quickly bottlenecked. Everyone was trying to push past each other to be the first out the door, willing to trample over each other if it meant that they got to escape. As Sonya narrowly avoided another elbow to the face, he couldn't help but think about how unhero-like this all was. You should just freeze everyone in place and take the first place for yourself. This isn't a race, Mel, and that won't help anyone else escape. Then just float yourself across if you're gonna be picky about it. Oh wait, that's a good idea. Creating a small platform for himself out of ice, Sonya carefully lifted himself over the sea of people, trying his best not to accidentally freeze anyone. From his new vantage point, he could see how terrible the situation really was. People were tripping over each other trying to rush through the narrow hallway to safety. He then turned to look outside, seeing if he could even find the source of the alarm. Outside the window opposite to him, Sonya could see a swarm of reporters at the front doors of the school, including his sister. "Damn it, Lubella, how the hell did you even get in here?" he muttered to himself. He took out his phone and took a picture, fully intending to complain about it in the group chat. Sonya was distracted from the scene outside by two loud voices coming from nearly directly below him. Kirishima and Kaminari were trying their best to catch the attention of the crowd, but were only succeeding in getting themselves trampled. Making a split-second decision, Sonya dove his hands into the crowd and fished around for the two boys. In one hand he caught Kirishima by the collar, and in the other he pulled Kaminari out by the arm, feeling a sense of déjà vu. Kaminari coughed as he held onto the platform. "Thanks man, I thought I was about to die. These people are so panicked that they can't hear us," Kirishima added, completely winded. "I know," said Sonya. "There's no real threat either. Look, it's just some nosy reporters asking about All Might." He pointed towards the front entrance. Kirishima was the first to act, putting his hands over his mouth like a megaphone and shouting into the crowd. "Hey, everyone, it's a false alarm, so stop panicking so much." There were a few heads that turned, but they were quickly lost under the tidal wave of bodies. Kaminari slammed his hands against the platform in frustration. "Damn it, they can't hear us from here. What should we do?" Kirishima asked. Sonya searched his brain for a solution, but he couldn't think of one. "I don't know," he admitted. What could he do? Everyone was too panicked to listen to them, and no one had noticed the crowd outside yet. Thinking back to Mel's words, freezing everyone in place almost seemed like the best option. There was taking cold rush as his quirk ran down his arms at the thought, probably Mel's doing. But he suppressed it. That would be the least helpful thing to do and would just make everyone panic even more. While the trio tried to come up with a solid plan of action, 𝗳𝗍 suddenly went cartwheeling through the air right past them, shaking himself square into the wall above the exit sign. "Everyone, everything's fine," he shouted, finally catching everyone's attention. "It's just the media. There's nothing to panic about. Everything's fine. This is you'll let us act in a way befitting the best of the best." Almost like magic, the crowd of people calmed down. Sonya lowered himself and his two classmates to the ground once again, now that it was safe to do so. In the distance they could hear sirens, signaling the end of the whole event. Sonya loved his family. He truly did. But at the same time he really hoped that Lubella would get arrested as a trade-off to how stressed she made him today. Lunch was over and everyone headed back to class, most having not been able to finish their lunches. Midoriya and Yaoyorozu stood at the front of the classroom, with Midoriya still shaking like a leaf. "And now, let us decide on the other class officers. But first, can I say something?" He interrupted himself. "I think that 𝗳𝗍 should be class rep after all. He was able to get everyone's attention in such a cool way. I think it would be best for 𝗳𝗍 to do it." Midoriya spoke earnestly. "I'm good with that too," Kirishima called out. Midoriya's saying it. "And it's true that 𝗳𝗍 was a big help at the cafeteria today." Kaminari also spoke up. "Yeah, and he kind of looked like the person on the emergency exit signs, didn't he?" Sonya had to stifle a laugh at that comment. Looking back on the event, he totally did. Right down to the angle of hill limbs. On the ground, Aizawa was still in his yellow sleeping bag. "You're wasting time," he stated lazily. "I don't care what you do, just hurry up and do it." Then he went back to laying down on the ground. 𝗳𝗍 stood up from his seat, a proud look washing over his face. "If the class rep has nominated me, then it cannot be helped. From this day forth, I, 𝗳𝗍, promise to do my best to carry out the duties of class representative. We're all counting on you." Emergency exit. Class ended and Sonya was left exhausted from the day. Even more exhausted than when he used his quirk. Right as he stepped past the UA threshold, a pair of arms wrapped around his shoulders and pulled him back. Sonya was about to go into fight or flight mode when he noticed the long frizzy black and white hair falling in front of his face. "Serious? Holy shit Sonya, are you okay? I got an alert from the school about a security breach going on. Is everything alright?" Sirius asked in a panic. He was panting and clearly out of breath, probably running to the school all the way from work. "Yeah, I'm fine. It was a false alarm. Just some reporters got through the gates to ask about All Might," Sonya explained. Sirius let out a relieved sigh. finally allowing himself to relax and catch his breath. "Oh, yeah, okay, it was just nothing. Thank God." "Well, not exactly nothing." Sonya brought out his phone and brought up the picture he took of his sister. "Guess who I caught sneaking into the UA grounds? Illegally." Sirius took one good look at the photo and let out a pain groan, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Fucking hell, Lubella," he muttered. "I'll ask Victor to talk to her. He's the only one she's scared of. We'll, her and Tanya, but she's been really busy lately." Sonya nodded and the two started walking home. Sirius complained about sore legs and winded lungs the whole way. Sonya rolled his eyes at all of it. "You know, for someone who likes to complain a whole lot, you have no one else to blame but yourself. You have a whole shop full of cars and motorcycles, and yet you decided to run on foot," Sonya chastised. Sirius looked aghast, making an exaggerated motion of his hand over his heart. "How dare you criticize my poor life decisions?" he huffed. Sonya snorted a laugh, feeling his stress melt away from the earlier day. He could always rely on Sirius to pick him up after a long day. He just hoped that there weren't too many of those in the days to come.